Goeiemorgen, good morning, honorable members. Good morning to the Premier, the DG, as well as your team that is with you today. To those members that are online, good morning to you as well as Advocate Williams. Thank you for your attendance. Members, I'm reminded on the 4th of June, when this committee had its very first meeting, members of that committee will remember that a physical fight almost broke out in our very first ComSafe meeting. But I'm happy to announce that since then, we've been able to successfully fight crime. We've seen in the latest quarterly crime stats that the murder rate came down. So we've been able to see how we are able to work jointly together as a committee in order to create safer spaces and hold the executive to account. Before I provide further introductory remarks, I am going to allow members to introduce themselves for the record, and then the Premier and his team. But next to me is Mr. Wasim Matthews, our Procedural Officer, together with our Assistant Procedural Officer, Mary Ann Burgess, and we have IT support with us. I'll now allow members in the House.
Thank you, Chair. It's Cameron Dugmore.
Thank you, Chairperson Ferlin Christians.
Thank you, Chairperson Khalid Sayed.
Chairperson Peter Murray.
Good morning, Chairperson Sean August.
Good morning, Matlodi Maseko.
Morning, Deirdre Bartman.
If those members online are able to introduce themselves for the record.
Good morning, Chairperson. In the case of Yolanda,
the Maritzburg High Court will deliver judgment in the civil matter involving the AmaZulu royal family.
Good morning, Chairperson Khalil Barankesh.
Since the passing of the late King Goodwill's.
Good morning, Chair and members, and the Premier, it's Member Mesuli Kama, member of the committee.
Good morning, Lorraine Botha.
Good morning, Chair. That interference wasn't me. It's Wendy Kaiser-Philander, and I'm standing in for Member Mackenzie this morning. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Member Rachel van Vogel.
Thank you so much, members.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Chair. Derek America, alternate.
Good morning, Gillian Bosman.
Thank you so much. We have a full house. Members, I also want to bring to your attention that it is my honor to formally welcome Deirdre Bartman as a permanent member to this committee. I also note that members would be aware that we have invited the Premier and Constitutional Matters Committee to also be in attendance here today. And we have with us the Chairperson, Lorraine Botha. I also see that Mr. Sean August is with us today. Please feel welcome, sir. Thank you for your attendance. I'll now allow the Premier for introductions and his team and Advocate Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, members. Good to be with you. Alan Wendy.
Morning, Chair. Good morning, members. My name is Harry Malila, and I'm the Accounting Officer for the Department of Premier, as well as the Director General of the Province. Thanks.
Good morning, Nico Boshoff, Acting DDG for Legal Services.
Advocate Williams.
Good morning. Sorry, I wasn't sure where I should introduce myself. Advocate Williams, pleased to meet you all, and thank you for inviting me to the committee meeting.
Thank you so much, members. You would be aware that we have members of the media, we have stakeholders, PMG, we have members of the public that is viewing online. Please feel welcome. This is a standing committee meeting for the Standing Committee on Community Safety, Cultural Affairs and Sport. I'm Regan Allen, and I am the chairperson of this standing committee. To provide brief context, members would be aware that since the suspension of the former MEC Albert Fritz, I have taken the liberty to engage the Premier. I have then subsequently shared the response from the Premier with the committee. During another meeting on the 1st of February, I again informed all the members and the members on the Premier Committee that we are going to invite the Premier as soon as the Premier has received his report. It was evident that both of these committees and this House, in fact, we take our role in terms of our oversight extremely seriously. And as of yesterday, we called for this urgent meeting to be conducted today, which is less than 23 hours, 22 hours since the Premier made an announcement. So thank you, Premier, for your willingness to appear before us today. Thank you, members, for making time in your schedule for this urgent meeting to discuss the briefing, where the Premier will brief us on the process followed, but also where we are able to engage him and ask questions. I'm not going to name who was fighting in that very first meeting, but I've since done some press-ups since then, but I trust that we are able to today engage. I've seen media articles, but I firmly believe that we are able to engage today in a constructive way. I also want to note that we have Advocate Yashina Pillay, the HOD for Community Safety, with us today. So without any further ado, members, you may go.
Thank you very much, Member Allen, Premier, and members and officials, Advocate Williams. Chairperson, early this morning, and this is an order point which relates to how we're going to proceed in this meeting. We received from the committee coordinator what was described as a summary and a conclusion, which I understand had been prepared by Advocate Williams. Chair, I want to ask right up front that given that taxpayers' money has been spent on this report, that we first of all want to register our disappointment that we have not received the report. And I would like to ask you, and possibly you can direct that question right at the outset, is that from where we are sitting, we want a full copy of all of the report, of all the evidence, obviously with the redaction of the removal of the names of the complainants. But can we be given an assurance before we proceed in this meeting that the full report and evidence will be provided to members of this committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Member Dagmo. In terms of our agenda today, members will note that there is a point 2 for actions and recommendations, and we will be discussing that during our actions and recommendations as a committee. But also, the Premier has heard what you have said here today, and I'm sure that he will potentially touch on the comments that you have made. In terms of moving forward, I will take Member Lekker. I see your hand is raised, Member Lekker.
Yes, it is, Chairperson. Am I audible enough?
We can hear you clearly.
Thank you, Chairperson. Ordinarily, a committee would be given a report, and the committee would then be getting what one would then term as a summary from whoever that will be made by questions. Chairperson, exactly what kind of approach is it that we are to follow if what Member Dagmo is requesting, we are then referred to point 2 of the agenda? Because ordinarily point 2 of the agenda will arise as a result of unsatisfactory answers or observations on the report itself. Now, I would really want to get clarity as to how did you arrive at a decision, or how do we then engage constructively and objectively on a summary that is presented to us as Parliament, and would then get a full report at a later stage? Because I would expect a full report, and then if we have whatever observations that we have, would then make the recommendations as per point 2. So I really need clarity in this regard, Chair. Thank you.
Chair. Member Lek, I note you. Member Murray.
Chair, I'm a bit confused. The Premier has a discretion who sits on his cabinet and who don't. You don't need an excuse. You don't even have to provide reasons if you want to reshuffle his cabinet. So the Premier could have fired Minister Fritz without even having given reasons and telling you all the sordid details which will destroy the man, but keeping these accusers' names a secret. This is not justice. So I want to know, whatever has so far been asked about the report, is the intention to reverse the decision of the Premier to fire Minister Fritz? What would be the purpose if the names of the accusers is still going to remain a secret? Mr. Fritz's name is not a secret. So I want to know if we get the report, but his accuser's name is a secret, the report will be of no value because I won't be able to attach any credibility to them. That's all I would like to.
Thank you, Member Murray. Before I deal with Member Lekker and with your comment, I see Member Christians.
Chairperson, thank you for that. Just that I was not even aware of the summary because, you know, we were looking at media statements. And so first of all, this summary was given us far too late. You know, we're on the road and a lot of stuff. So that is really disappointing. Secondly, you've given us the letter as the committee. We've been following this, and I just believe it's unfair if we don't see the report ourselves. You know, it's a major impact. It's a major impact, and I agree that the accuser's name, we're not interested in that. But if it's so serious that a man, last night he resigned, I saw last night on the news, he resigned from the DA. So my question is, why is the report not made available? Why a summary this morning? But I'm unhappy that we got this only this morning because the Premier received the report on Sunday evening, met with the advocate on Monday. Surely this could have given sooner. And why did we not receive the entire report? Thank you, Chairperson.
I see another hand online, but I see Member Bartman and then Member Kama in that order.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I just want to find out if the Premier is here to speak to the particular matter and the respective advocates from that department also here to speak to the respective matter, including processes. Perhaps in the presentation or briefing, perhaps the lawyers can assist us with why the report is not in its full report before us, because my understanding, and I'm speaking now from a personal, if it's something that, for example, was affecting me, secondary victimization in our society is a real thing. So maybe from a legal perspective, when the briefing is being done, the lawyers can just assist us with the impact of not putting that report before us, because my understanding is that under normal circumstances, a member of the legislature might have been referred to the conduct committee. And in the conduct committee, everything is confidential in camera until a decision is made regarding a matter. Now, because the member is technically now not a member anymore, and it doesn't go to conduct, both I guess in law, plaintiff and defendants would almost have to be protected in terms of rights. So maybe if the lawyers can just address us on that matter and the impact as to where such information then lies, maybe that would be able to assist us. Thank you, Chair.
Members, before I see Member Kama, if your point is directly linked to what other members has already ventilated, I will first respond to the members and their comments made. Members, in terms of Rule 42, I need to maintain order in this meeting. Like I've indicated, that we have called for this urgent meeting to be conducted today, which is less than 24 hours since the announcement from the Premier. I do appreciate members being here and are going to engage the Premier in this regard. We have Advocate Williams with us as well, and I will encourage members that directly after Member Kama, if his hand still remains up after my comment, is that we will proceed, and any questions that you may have, you are then able to pose it to the Premier. And like I've indicated, Member Lekker, point 2, there is on each and every agenda item a point for us to discuss recommendations, request information as a committee directly after a particular briefing. And I will maintain that standard, and I trust that you will find that in order. I see Member Lekker, your hand has since been lowered. Member Kama, your hand is still up.
No, thanks, Chair. I was also going to. I think there's a Skype RPK chair that is not on.
Ngoba icelo zakho beziningi izinto abeyifakile esiceleni sakhe la kodwa ke.
Members, as you would know, with all technology, there's some glitches, but we will try to maintain that people are muted as soon as possible. We don't want to overhear anything we are not supposed to. Member Kama, you may proceed.
No, thank you, Chair. The point that I wanted to make is the point that I think Member Lekker was making, and I don't think, Chair, you are responding to that particular question. Because the issue here is that, or the understanding that even I have as a member, is that the Premier is here to brief us on the report. Now, the challenge here that we're raising is that we're being briefed on a report that we do not know and have not seen. That's as simple as that, because even I myself, I just read this summary now, literally 20 minutes ago, when I went to check if we had received up until that time another report, but I saw it was sent earlier this morning. But I'm saying, Chair, even going through that summary, it does not talk to the report itself. It just gives you a very high level summary, which would bar us, Chair, on our responsibility to exercise oversight over the executive. And exactly from the point that Comrade, Member Cameron was making, Member Dagmo was making, around the taxpayers' money being used for the process of this investigation. There are taxpayers' money that have been used, and we have a responsibility as a committee to really see that report so that we're able to interrogate it. Now, imagine a situation, Chair, where we see the report later, and then after seeing the report, we again make calls for us to sit in this particular fashion in order for us to exercise oversight over the Premier. It's not about whether we want to reverse
Member Kama,
to really fire the MEC.
Kama, you are saying the same thing in different ways over and over, sir. I would like for us to proceed. I have taken your point. Are you going to add anything new at this time?
Perhaps, Chair, the clarity is: are we going to be briefed on a report that we have not seen? Are you saying it's okay for us to be briefed on a report that we have not seen because we can ask for it on an agenda item number 2? That's where the confusion exists.
I will reply to you now, Member Kama. Member Lekker, is there any new point that you would like to bring? And this will be the last hand that I will note before we proceed.
No, Chairperson, there's one or two issues that I want to highlight from the comments that perhaps you have made, and I think it's only fair we do it right now before we waste more time and we realize that we're being hamstrung. One is the fact that you refer to this meeting, that it is taking place 24 hours after the report was released. And that is technically not true because the report was released on Sunday. And number 2, Chair, which maybe we will really need to speak to it so that we don't confuse things, is the fact that all of us are members of this legislature, and I find it difficult to digest the fact that you said you want to put order into this house, because while saying you want to put order, it seems as if you are emotionally blackmailing members of this legislature who has got a right to oversight. And we understand the rules of procedure in a meeting, but for you to say you are going to raise an order, it is understandably an issue of you wanting to blackmail us emotionally, because we're following the process here, including attending to the issue of item number 2 in the agenda itself. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Member Lekker. I've had 2 cups of coffee. I might need more considering how we are proceeding this morning, but let me state again for the record, members. When this urgent committee meeting was called, we are going to receive a briefing from the Premier with regard to the process that he has undertaken, that he has followed since the suspension of the former MEC Albert Fritz on the 23rd of January. We will then get information from the Premier and from the advocate, and if the DG wants to come in, and if Mr. Boshoff wants to come in terms of information. We will then be able to ask questions pertaining to the input that has been received from the Premier, and from there we will proceed. I do take the points, Member Lekker, Member Kama, Member Dagmo, everyone, I do take the points into consideration, but in terms of us moving forward, it is definitely not to blackmail anyone in this house. We want to see how we are able to proceed, and I do want to assure members that as this committee chair, we have seen that we are able to work together jointly towards creating safer communities here across the metro and our rural areas. So I would want us to proceed in the interest of time. This meeting has been set for 10 until 12:30. Before we proceed, Member Botha, you have a point?
Chair, just to support your point, let's move forward. We can handle the report issue in the recommendations. Please, let's proceed.
Bye, thank you, Member Botha. On that note, I'm going to give directly over to the Premier at this time. Premier, once again, thank you for your willingness to be here under short notice and for shifting your diary around for us to engage and address on this particular matter.
Thank you very much, Chair, and to the members. And I'm not actually going to answer the questions that have been asked now about the actual report, because I'm going to ask the legal people to just answer. But before we get there, I just want to say a few things in general. And then I'm happy to answer any questions on my decision on the decision around how I dealt with the suspension, and then, of course, the firing of an MEC. I was just thinking back to say, it's interesting, every time there's a cabinet shuffle in any province or nationally, or if any case has been raised, it's interesting to see. I mean, I'm happy to report to these standing committees on how I made my decision, why I made my decision. And of course, that's their right, because this is oversight. But this is not a court of law to determine what actually happened in this case. This is not a court of law. That, I sincerely hope, is going to be the next stage in this process. I really do hope that that will be what happens next. So I want to say on the outset, I think everyone in this committee will agree with me. Everyone in our province will agree with me, and everyone in our country will agree with me. Gender-based violence is a big issue in our country. It's a really big issue. If I've learned one thing in the last few weeks, abused women are petrified of coming forward. If someone sitting in this government, in a business somewhere in society is busy watching this online saying, I'm being abused in this environment, and Parliament wants all the salacious detail, I'm never going to come forward. You must be crazy. Just having to make that decision knowing that there's going to be this hectic court case at some stage where lawyers are going to cross-question you and are going to, the other side is going to accuse you of all sorts of things. I have learned that it is not easy to come forward at all. And I'm just speaking in general now. You know, when people want to know who did what to when, how, and what were the circumstances, because we want that salacious detail of this report, I want to ask why. Because I will say right now that in the role that I play and what I have witnessed and what I have listened to, I will defend the victims to the absolute end. And if they say to me, I do not want, I'm going to tell you what happened to me, but I do not want it laid out on the table in Parliament or I do not want journalists phoning me. This is what happened. Journalists phoning me to say, was it you? Are you one of... It is unbelievable. So if we are to deal with gender-based violence in our country, in our province, in this government, we need to make sure that we protect those that want to come forward. And we've really got to think about this into the future. I also want to say that, and I'm prepared to, I think maybe we must deal with that question first about the report. You know, if we are to protect those victims or those complainants with the allegations that have been made, which are very serious allegations, which we know that eventually they do come out in court, it is all in court. You know how difficult it is to understand that's what's going to happen to you in the future. And yeah, I don't think that this is a platform where we need to put those salacious details on the table. Even as the Honourable Bartman said, what about in a closed, even then, I cannot, not after giving my word. But I think legally, let's talk about, you know, what of the report can be tabled to this committee based on my commitments, but also, I mean, let's ask the advocate. This is an independent, and remember, I interviewed the first two. I was involved in that. It then moved to 4 + 2, so 6 altogether, of which even the second two, I was in the initial stage, but I didn't even listen to the detail. I said, here is a legal person, listen to the detail, and then I still, to this day, even from the report, don't have all of the detail because I don't believe I need that detail in that depth. What I've got is sufficient for me to make up my mind. And that actually is where my responsibility is number one, is making up my mind on whether someone is a fit and proper person to serve on this cabinet. I think the Honourable Marais said it. I mean, I believe in due process. I believe in being fair. I believe in audi altrum partem, even when it's making a decision in a cabinet. I know that at national level, it has also been half-tested in court when the president, you know, fired a finance minister and replaced them, and then next week that put this person back in. There was, you know, what enabled you to make that decision? There are questions about that, but you know, I've got to make sure that I've got sufficient to be able to make my decision, and they definitely is sufficient for me to make my decision. It's not proven in a court of law. That still has to happen, and we are in that process, and I sincerely hope that process continues. But on the question of actually making the full report available, even by removing the names, I would actually like Advocate Williams or even our legal rep, Nico Boshoff, to probably comment legally on that process, if that's possible.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Premier. Before we take any hands from members, we will give directly over to Advocate Williams, who is joining us online. Once again, thank you so much for your attendance here today and for agreeing yesterday to join us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me. And before I start, I would just like to say that I appreciate the unusual circumstances under which I'm here to talk about this report. I would very much like the committee to be sensitive in the fashion which this is handled. I'm aware that the complainants are watching, and I'm sure that Mr. Fritz is probably also watching. And at the outset, I would like to say that these are unusual circumstances. This is a report of a different kind, in a different context, and in our constitutional democracy with high levels of gender-based violence, I think we need to be perhaps a little bit more flexible and sensitive to the different rights that need to be balanced in such a process. You have the rights of Mr. Fritz, and I think perhaps the Premier has covered that. He appointed me because he had rumours, and he wanted to test whether there was sufficient credibility to the rumours to inform his decision so that he could take a rational decision. You also have the rights of the complainants. You have the rights of other witnesses. And then obviously there's the right of this body. which I think as a representative of the people would conduct itself in such a fashion as not to violate the rights of MEC Fritz and the complainants. I would like to explain how the process unfolded, because I think it might give you some clarity as to why the report is remaining in a large sense confidential. These complainants initially came forward, some of them, and they expressed from the outset a fear of reprisals, a fear of reputational damage, and fear of their job security. There was a concern about whether they could trust the process and whether they would actually come forward at all. Secondly, I myself received messages from members of all different political parties and factions, also trying to intimidate me to back off and not to proceed with the investigation. So I think you need to be aware in that context and setting that it was very difficult for these complainants to come forward and give their versions. They agreed to do so on condition that their versions remain confidential. However, I was then faced with the dilemma that MEC Fritz cannot respond to unknown allegations, and it would not be fair to him if he wasn't given the detail of the allegations. With the result that I went back to the complainants and I obtained their consent. And the reason I've done this in such a fashion of obtaining consent from the claimants every step of the way is because I feel that we should follow a victim-centered approach, but one which empowers women. So in the circumstances that I was investigating, I did not wish to further disempower the complainants. The complainants then gave me a set of allegations ranging from February 2018 to February 2021, which were, there were 4 complainants, primary complainants, and there were then 8, I wouldn't call them charges, but allegations which I then provided to MEC Fritz in detail with regard to exactly what had happened. It is these details that the complainants do not wish to be the subject of media reports and to be disclosed to the public. They've given me consent to disclose it to the Premier and to disclose it to Mr. Fritz. I met with Mr. Fritz and his legal representative, and it was agreed that we would provide those details in order to give him an opportunity to give a response which dealt with what the allegations actually were. And as a result, the very premise of the starting point of the report and the participation of the parties was such that the identities of the complainants and any details which would give away who they are would be protected and would be treated as confidential. As the Premier said, this is not a court of law, nor is it a disciplinary inquiry in the labour context. This is simply a fact-finding exercise in order to establish whether there is credibility to the allegations or whether they are simply rumours and should be disregarded. And this is then what I proceeded to do. Advocate Fritz's advocate came back to me, requested further details in relation to the specific venues and timeframes. I then went back and gave him those details and gave him an opportunity to respond in full. I do not believe it's necessary or appropriate for the exact details of the incidents to be disclosed. Unfortunately, if you try and redact the report, because of the small size of the ministry and the nature of the trips where things happened and the events that they happened, it's so easy to guess who is involved that it actually makes a joke of the confidentiality. So what I would like to inform the committee is that to the extent that it's relevant, and I don't think it is, because I think any form of any of the allegations would have justified a rational decision, but be that as it may, to the extent that the committee feels it is necessary to know the nature of the allegations. The allegations range from sexual comments, inappropriate sexual comments, to inappropriate touching of the complainants, attempts to kiss and kissing without consent, as well as sexual intercourse. And as I say, they range over a period of a number of years and over a number of incidents, and the exact details would give away the identity of the claimant. Secondly, it would prejudice any future criminal complaints that these complainants wish to make, and I feel that we should not jeopardize their choice and right to do so if they wish to. It might also jeopardize Mr. Fritz's defense of criminal cases. And the second complication in this matter was that there was a parallel disciplinary process running, which involved the officials who were employed by the department. So MEC Fritz is not an employee, and as such, it is not required that there be a full disciplinary inquiry and he get further particulars and cross-examine witnesses and so forth, whereas those employees will have the right to a fair labor practice. And to the extent that the allegations intersect, and they are all represented by the same legal counsel, I had actually requested to meet with the other witnesses, and this was declined because it may impact negatively on their disciplinary procedures, which I accepted, and MEC Fritz then produced statements from those witnesses. I also then interviewed the further witnesses that he requested me to interview. And essentially what I produced is a report which sets out my terms of reference, an introduction. The bulk of the report is a summary of evidence. The evidence is comprised of the 4 primary complainants and then a number of corroboration witnesses who corroborated what the primary complainant said. So for example, where there was a factual dispute which could be easily resolved, for example, at a particular venue, where was the bathroom in relation to the bedroom, I would contact the owner of that venue, clarify that, and then be able to say very simply, this is, what kind of bathroom it was, where it was situated. So some of the witnesses were formal witnesses in that sense. Others came forward as in order to corroborate versions, either of Mr. Fritz or of the complainants. However, the nature of sexual harassment allegations is such that it's very often a he said, she said situation, and there were only 2 people in the room. So ultimately, one has to weigh up the credibility of the allegations in that context, which is why I then have indicated that I thought it was appropriate to release the conclusion of the report so that you could understand how I had assessed the evidence and come to my conclusion. The conclusion is not a finding of guilt on a balance of probabilities. I am not a court of law. It is simply the result of a fact-finding exercise, a weighing up of the evidence that was before me, which included video evidence and WhatsApps, and these were provided to me by MEC Fritz and by the complainants, again on a confidential basis, and then to reach the conclusions that there was sufficient credibility to these allegations. They are not rumors that can simply be dismissed. There is some truth to them, and that the defense that was provided did not adequately or substantively address the nature of and the detail of the allegations. I would disagree that MEC Fritz was not provided with the detail, but be that as it may, that can play itself out as it does ultimately. And the defense that there was a political conspiracy was essentially, to me, found to be not likely because of the nature of the complaints over the period of time and the logistical number of people who would have had to give identical or similar stories of incidents which showed a pattern of conduct which was of some concern. So I hope that that would address the committee's concern and need for having the actual report. I think you need to be aware that you need to weigh the legal rights, not just of this committee, but of the complainants themselves. And this is not a public report in the sense that these are private individuals who have cooperated on certain grounds and who have given very personal information on condition that it will be kept only for the Premier to see and in certain circumstances for MEC Fritz to see. The reputational damage to the complainants would be very serious, and I also think it might undermine any action that MEC Fritz takes or is taken against him in litigation in the future. So I'm not sure if that is sufficient, but that is my 10 cents worth.
Thank you so much, Advocate Williams. Advocate Boshoff, is there any comment from you at this stage?
No, I think Advocate Williams really covered everything I would like to add to this issue.
Thank you so much. I see the hands are raising already. Members, I would like to draw your attention once again to Rule 42 as well as Rule 44. Rule 44, for the sake of, so that I can be extremely clear, in case any member is not aware, I'm as clear as I can be. So when a member persists in irrelevance or repetition of arguments, the presiding officer may call attention to the conduct of the member and may then direct that member to stop talking. Rule 44. I mentioned that in the light of my following recommendation to move forward. I am going to note members, and members of this committee will know that we have always been open to debate, to be robust, to be vigorous in our engagement. Thank you that you are here, Member Dagmo. So we know that. So I'm going to allow 2 minutes for members that have any question, comment, clarity seeking, comments, questions. 2 minutes, and then I will take it from there. I have noted Member Dagmo, Member Ferlin Christians, Sean August, Peter Marais, honorable members in that order, and Member Botha, Member Lekker online in that order. Members, is there anyone else at this stage for round 1? So in that order, Member Dagmo. Thank you.
Member Kama, Chair.
Yeah. No, thank you, Chair. No, Chair, thank you for reminding us of those rules, but let's not be defensive. This is a meeting of both standing committees. We want to conduct this process with the sensitivity it deserves. But I just want to say at the outset, you know, I find it, it's not about asking for salacious details. We have a situation here where the Premier agrees that GBV is a massive problem. The issue is we're talking about GBV and what facilitates it in this government. It's a matter of record that as we speak, a chief director of this provincial government who is criminally charged for sexual act, for attempted rape, is still a chief director in this province. So by getting details of how all of this was facilitated, I would argue we begin to deal with the problem. So it's not wanting salacious details, it's wanting to know, was there facilitation from bodyguards? Was there facilitation from ministerial staff? Was there facilitation from heads of department? How were people recruited, etc., etc. So let's not underestimate the importance of us digging deep on this issue so that we actually deal with how these things could have happened. But particularly in regard to Advocate Williams, you know, I want to make it very clear that this legislature has different procedures. We have procedures to go into committee, and, you know, with all due respect to the advocate, it is this committee that needs to decide. And I would like to ask in the response and of the legal advisor, you know, give a comment if we have to resort to a PIA application. You know, please give us a comment as to whether you think that application would be successful or not. I would like to ask the following quick questions. Number one, what is the number of pages in the unedited full report? What is the number of pages in regard to all the affidavits, the actual report, the evidence, so that we have a sense of the fact that we're actually asking for all of that? So if she can give us that. She, if I heard Advocate Williams correctly, indicated that she was intimidated by various factions. If I understood her correctly, she said something about that she herself. Can she tell this committee the names of people who intimidated her, from which political parties they were, and can she give us detail on it? That is an incredibly serious issue, and she can just clarify if she could, did she formally receive terms of reference from the Premier? Can we have a copy of the letter that actually gave her the terms of reference, and can she provide more information about what parallel DC processes are underway? Who's been charged from the department? Who's been charged from the MEC staff? My time is up.
Thank you so much. This is for 2 minutes. It's also a peace sign, Member Dagmo. Thank you. Member Christians, we will keep it flowing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. Just, you know, at the moment, we are informed of what's happening in the media. Right. So now you hear one side of the story former MEC Fritz says it's a one-sided investigation. He says his legal team never have opportunity to question the complainants. He's disputing the facts. Now we're getting it from this side, from the media, but we don't know what the facts are. So it's not about details. It's about what. And Fritz, he made a statement last night. He said it's political assassination. So this is, we must know, is this politics involved or what is the story here? And he said that he stayed dignified and with his contact and all of those. Now you hear that from Albert Fritz. Now you get this allegations. What do you believe? Is it a political game, political ploy? Did they assassinate the guy politically or what's happening? And just again, just to latch on to Member Dugmore, did the advocate go lay a criminal charge against these threats that she received? Did she inform the Premier about these threats? This is what we want to know, because if there's two sides or other political parties, that we need to know that. And that is why the committee is here. Thank you, Chair.
Member August.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'd like to know, and thank you to the Premier for protecting those victims. Gender-based violence is a major issue in our country, and we can never give names in the report because no other workers will come forward if we do give those names. But one question is, the advocate spoke about 2018 to 2021. How long has the Premier known about these allegations? Has these allegations ever been reported to the CCMA? Is the Premier aware of this? And if so, why did he only act in January month 2022? Thank you.
Yes, I got a few questions. I hear the people are, everybody is jumping to the defense of the accusers. I don't know if you following the rule of law. Even when they accused the King of England, future king, they had to say who accused them. I just want them to note that. The second thing is, I've heard that Mr. Fritz, he heard about this meeting and he said to me he's taking it on review. He's consulting his advocates now. Premier and your legal team, if he wins the review, I know it won't mean that he must be reinstated. That will still be the discretion of the Premier. But would an injustice have been meted out to him if on review he wins? I want the legal team to tell me that. If he sues his accusers for crime and injury, like he's also contemplating, will the province help these ladies who complained with legal, financing their legal costs? Or are they going to be left to defend themselves in a court? And if that's so, what would their chances be? Are they by the means to defend themselves in a crime and injury case? And then the question of if there was intimidation. Did the intimidation only come from one side? It's an important question that was asked. Did Mr. Fritz's people intimidate you? Or did the accuser's people intimidate you into finding in their favor? We would like to know the nature of this intimidation, because otherwise it could be said the Premier's office has become a pseudo High Court.
Thank you so much, Member Marais. We will now note Member Botha.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I want to respect the confidentiality of the complainants. I also want to then say that I trust that in regard to the principle that this gives an opportunity, if there are other complainants that are going through the same ordeal. And I trust that this gives them an opportunity to be strong enough to come forward. Because I do not think, Chair, that this might be just these complainants. Then I want to ask in regard to the report that we have received. In the report, it says the former Minister Fritz was provided with a summary of the specific allegation. And my question is, did this contain names of the complainants? And then in regard to the paragraph talking about the alleged misconduct and alcohol abuse that occurred at work or on work trips, I want to know in regard to these work trips, Chair, did it include accommodation? In other words, they were off-site, and did it include sleeping over? And I want to know this accommodation, was this accommodation paid by the department or the ministry? Thanks.
So much, Member Botha, for sticking with the time. Member Lekker, I note you.
Thank you, Chairperson. You know, Chairperson, this report comes at a time where some of us within the various political parties that exist in this provincial parliament found themselves in a difficult predicament. Clearly, you can hear from some factions of the DA that they have a leverage of information. I am not a Sangoma and I do not want to intend to be one, but I can clearly hear from the comments that are being made that members of the Democratic Alliance knows something that we as other political parties do not. Allow me, Chair, to be precise and ask one or two questions in relation to the actual offense or alleged offense itself. Understanding that we're dealing with the grounds of probabilities here, and we do not have to prove beyond reasonable grounds at any level because we're not a court of law. But I also understand that in this fashion, for now, we are not speaking on a matter that is at the level of court, and therefore there are issues that we may not speak about because the matter is not at court so far. I want to understand, one, were there any of the alleged victims below the age of 21? Are they still employed by the departments or departments that the former minister worked in? And 2, 3, which suburbs were these people recruited from? Because they were recruited from particular areas within a constituency. We would want to know that. And the last one, maybe, which I want to know, in terms of what the Premier has reported, that these people came to him.
Thank you so much, Member Lekker.
Victims referred to him by anybody, or how? Did you get the last question?
The Department and the Premier has made a note. Thank you so much, Member Lekker. I see Member Malikaya's hand also went up, and in the interest of us engaging, I am going to note him, and he will be the last person, member, for this particular round. You may go, Member.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, I see Member Kama is also talking now. I'm not sure who should go first.
Kama, and then it will be you, sir.
Sure. Okay, Member Kama.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I think likewise, I must add to the question that was asked by Member Dagmore, and I think even Member Christians had something to say around that question. Of intimidation towards Advocate Williams. I want to add in the categories that Member Dagmore was mentioning, that is there anyone that perhaps the advocate could identify as a member of this House or an official of government that made those particular threats? Chair, the question that I have, and really I won't ask questions based on the report that I really do not have appreciation of. But the question that I'm going to ask is based on how this matter was handled. Now, I want to check with the Premier, Chair, whether, because if you look at what is mentioned in the media, in his statements, and at one point, the Premier, in a statement he released on the 31st of January, in that statement, he says that he has not by that time, or let me say, he says that he would be advised later by the report itself as to he must lay charges. There's a reference that he makes around that there. Now, I want to understand what was the understanding of the Premier in terms of the law at that particular stage, because it brings me to the point, Chair, which I want to understand. There's an Act number 13 of 2021, the Criminal Law and Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act. In that Act,
Member Kama, are you able to wrap up?
Yes, I'm wrapping up, Chair. In that Act, it talks about sexual intimidation, and one of these things that I mentioned might include that, but in that very same Act, it broadens the definition of what you call your vulnerable groups. But most importantly, in that Act, it puts an obligation to any person who has a knowledge, you know, of something that might have happened, which is sexually related. Now, I want to ask, Chair.
Kama, thank you so much. I would want to stick to the time so that we are able to proceed accordingly. And I trust that the Premier's department and the Premier has caught the gist of your comment. I trust you find that in order, sir. I now see Member Malikaya.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Mine is to the Premier's direct that having noted or known that Advocate Williams was being harassed or intimidated, what has the Premier done as a person who has instituted this process? And secondly is that the victims, were the victims found to have been beneficiaries of an unfair process with the entire investigation? Did they benefit unfairly? And then lastly is that, is there anything financially or otherwise that the Premier's office would be able to do to assist the victims going forward as far as to the legal process? Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you so much. In the interest of time, I'll take your 1 minute and 12 seconds. I just want to latch on, Premier, in terms of and maybe the DG or the HOD for the department regarding the 4 officials. Is there an update in that regard? Thank you. This I will.
Chair, I will respond.
Members, what I will do now is that I will afford the opportunity for the Premier, Advocate Williams, as well as Mr. Boshoff, in order to reply to some of the legal arguments and questions that were posed. And then I will bring in Advocate Pillay to answer directly afterwards. Advocate, you may go. Okay, perfect. In that order then.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to premise or manage expectations in respect of how Advocate Williams is approached by the committee. We need to understand she was briefed for through the State Attorney's Office for a very specific assignment, and and Premier's already explained that. So I'm happy to deal with some of the more general legal questions as Advocate Williams was not appointed to advise the Premier in any specific capacity. So if I may just start quickly with regards to the questions around PAIA and so on, and without, expressing an opinion as such, but one has to keep in mind that PAIA only affords the protections within the Act to where the information is sought in the furtherance of a right of an individual or a juristic person. So question is, what rights would be furthered by a request for access to the full report? Then secondly, an information officer is empowered by the Act to refuse a request for access to information where that information would either disclose confidential information or disclose the personal information of potential victims or complainants, etc. And there's also a further rider where the information may be refused, where it could undermine legal proceedings, etc. Now, given the context of where we are at the point in time, that may eventually materialize. So we just need to keep that in mind. And maybe just to go to that and the comment, I didn't quite get the member's name, but regarding the Sexual Offences Amendment Act, we just need to also bear in mind that the complainants also still have agency in this whole process, and it's not for us necessarily to decide that we're going to the police on their behalf. If they don't want to face, cross-examination in a criminal trial or whatever, it's up to them. But and Premier can expand on what we've done to date on that front. I can confirm we are busy internally looking at what type of assistance can, within our internal policies, be offered to the complainants from a legal point of view and legal support down the road. So it is something on our radar, and we are looking at it. And then just to Member Marais' questions regarding the review, I think one must just contextualize that whole space within the Constitutional Court ruling regarding, I think it was Minister Gordon a few years ago, but that matter unfortunately became academic shortly before the court could actually hear the matter because he was reinstated, if I can remember correctly. And so the court touched on it, but expressly said they're not comfortable to actually give any sort of binding view on it without having a proper case before them. So at the moment, there is no judicial precedent for the tests that might possibly apply to these types of decisions. We don't even know whether Rule 53 would apply to the Premier's decision. It's also not clear from Mr. Fritz's statements what he will or what he intends taking on review, whether it's the decision or the report itself. So in that regard, we're also, ready to advise Premier on the way forward once we have clarity on that regard. But I'm not at liberty to say whether or not an injustice would have been served on him. I mean, that would depend on what the court finds at the end of the day. But what we can confirm is that despite what we view as a potentially verging on a executive prerogative on the side of the Premier, Minister Fritz was afforded as fair a process as possible in the fact-finding exercise. And the report is the product of that, and Premier has applied his mind to that and made his decision. Thanks. Advocate Williams will then just obviously address the questions regarding the size of the report and her.
Thank you so much, Advocate Boshoff. I note you, Advocate Williams.
Yes. Just to say on the messages, let's not get distracted by that. I was not intimidated, whatever the intention was. I wasn't threatened. I was essentially told to back off in the sense that I don't have jurisdiction and it's a police matter. I've saved the numbers and I will provide them to the chairperson at a later stage. The point that I was trying to make is that when you release details to the public, you can't control what is going to happen to the identities that you release. On relation to the actual report itself, with regard to the question of whether any of the complainants were below 21, the answer is yes. With regard to whether they are still employed, the answer is yes to some of them, and below 21, yes to one. I don't know which suburbs they were recruited from. I don't have that information to be able to give you. I can confirm that the allegations that were provided to MEC Fritz did contain the identities of the complainants, the dates, more or less a time and an exact venue, and precise detail of what was alleged to have occurred at that time in the allegation. The report is, so the actual report report is about, sorry, Mr. Dugmore, 81 pages, of which the summary of evidence is from page 11 to 42. Mr. Fritz's responses are from 42 to 54. And my analysis, I give the legal framework from 58 to 62. That relates largely to sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. And I give some indication of what grooming can be said to do, just to inform the decision maker. The actual analysis of the evidence is 62 to 78. Including the specific defenses raised by MEC Fritz, and then there's a one-page conclusion. The annexures do not contain affidavits, they contain statements, articles in the newspaper submitted by MEC Fritz, the MEC Fritz's written responses, emails from the complainants, photographs of the venues and WhatsApp conversations that allegedly took place, photographs of the alcohol that was at the venues, and they constitute, I think, another 80 or so pages. So that is the answer on that question. With regard to the accommodation being paid for by the government, my terms of reference did not include the sort of financial and procurement aspects thereof, but I can confirm that some of the incidents occurred on work-related trips where they would be staying at accommodation for the purposes of work. I can only assume that it would have been paid for by the programs, but I cannot confirm that, and it wasn't part of my terms of reference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will see the Premier now and the DG. Thank you. Advocate Williams. Advocate Williams.
Yes, sir.
Just before you went on mute, you mentioned the terms of reference. Are you able to elaborate on the terms of reference that you have received?
Okay, the terms of reference that I have received, I think you've been provided with. I'm not sure the Premier's office can provide you with the actual letter, but the terms of reference that I received required me to assess the factual correctness of the allegations against MEC Fritz and produce a report which can inform a reasonable, rational opinion on the part of the Premier, as to whether the allegations that have been made have sufficient credibility for him to dismiss the Minister from the Provincial Cabinet or not. I was then also given the names of 4 or 5 witnesses who I asked them to get their consent for me to contact, and I then contacted the witnesses and started afresh to see what the nature of the evidence was.
Thank you so much. Before I note members again, I'll allow for comment from the Premier and if the DG wants to comment.
Thank you very much, Chair. So also getting to those questions, Honourable August, thank you very much. You spoke about the report from, or what the advocate now said on 2018, and when I knew about it and that process, I'll deal with that now. So the first time I had any reference was on a telephone call in November. I then said that and from a third party, I said I cannot take a telephone call third party talking about somebody else. I need that person to give me the detail and I will react to it. Please pass that back to that person. The next day I actually met the third party and said, please, I need you to do this for me. You need to say to this person, they must come forward. So that's the first time I heard of it. And I heard that there was one person. Between then and then the messages I got, they are going to meet with their lawyers. They're going to put their story together because I said I needed to put it in writing that I can actually have some substance to deal with. What happened between then and the 14th is that one person found someone else to come with them. And on the 14th was the first time I met with them. They brought their position in writing, and raised these issues. They also, in that space, raised the names of some other people. So I said, all right, I will definitely deal with this. Is there any chance you can speak to these other people? Let's make sure that they come into it. I then also asked that we bring in our legal team. So I had lawyers in the process from day one to say, all right, we need to now deal with this. And over the next 7 days, from the 14th to the 21st, we actually ended up engaging with 6 people altogether, 4 females with allegations and 2 males with corroboration and other comments and statements supporting. That was ended at, I think it must have been about 6 or 7 o'clock on the Friday evening of the 21st. Then I engaged with the legal team afterwards. And also maybe I just want to say that I had direct engagement with the first 2 who gave me all of the details. The second 2, I welcomed them. I introduced them to our legal team, and I didn't remain in the meeting to get the details. It was agreed with the legal team that probably that's not what I've got to make up my mind on what to do with this and how to take it forward. So it probably wasn't a good idea that I sit in on that meeting. So I then excused myself. Our legal team continued with the other 4 engagements. Those engagements then concluded, as I said, on the 21st. On the 22nd, our legal team put the story together, and on the 23rd, I called for the meeting with the detail, with the legal representatives, and met with Minister Fritz. I told him that I'd received these serious allegations, that I need to investigate these allegations, and that I'm suspending him immediately in order to have these allegations tested. I also, he agreed with me that he would also play his part in making sure that there's fair due process. He needs to be able to answer the allegations. That was agreed. He was suspended. At the same time, straight after that, I then engaged with the Director General and the head of department, and that's probably going to be part of what the secondary answer is, because at the same time from the allegations, I knew that we also had to make sure that there were people involved in the office. In other words, we've just heard there were trips, or who was booking the trips, who went along on the trips. So at the same time, and from the allegations, 4 individuals in the office also needed to be suspended. That then happened within the administration. I don't have the power to suspend them. The administration does. And so that then kicked off a secondary process. That was on the Sunday. On the Monday morning, I asked legal services to start the process through the State Attorney's Office to get an independent investigator. Because I knew that if I then said, all right, I'm going to get the legal team in the Premier's office to investigate this, it probably wouldn't be seen as a proper, due and fair process. So then we said, let's go out through the State Attorney's Office and call for an independent investigator. And through that process, I think it was by Thursday, Advocate Williams was appointed, and I had my first meeting with Advocate Williams on the Friday, or my first and only meeting, to say, these are the allegations I've got. Our legal team handed it over to her. I still said to her, can we please try this in 14 days? And she said she will try as much and quickly as possible. I think we know that she has said that she interviewed not 6, but 18 people altogether. And it didn't take 14 days. It took 21, 22, or 23 days. And then, of course, I got the report once it was finished, then had to engage with her on it. And perhaps there also to say that the report, for me, there's 2 processes here. The one is I've got serious allegations against a minister that I've appointed in a responsible space in my cabinet. Should that minister remain in my cabinet, I've given a due and fair process. This is not a court of law, but from what I gleaned from the report and from the findings in the report, I am then comfortable to say that in actual fact, based on that, and whatever happens going forward, I am comfortable enough to dismiss the minister from my cabinet. So that's what I used the report for. Secondary to that, it actually goes to some of the other questions, is what I do with that report. I did, straight after dismissing Minister Fritz, or now Mr. Fritz, from on the morning I met with the complainants, the 4 complainants. I haven't met any of the other complainants, so I don't know who they are. And even the complainants that have come forward once the case was in place, because Advocate Williams had some other people come to her, and even in giving me the report, I don't have their names either, because they also are saying, please, we don't want our names like this. So I don't even have their names. I know one said that she's prepared to, that the advocate can give me her name, but I've said she doesn't need to give me her name. I don't need that name. We need to make sure that now it goes into the legal processes, charges are laid, etc. But that brings me, and that's the next phase of this process. So I again engaged with the 4 complainants, told them what I'd done. Thank you for the bravery in coming forward. We will support you. I mean, the question about we're looking now within the framework of how do we support them. Some of them work for us, some of them don't work for us. But automatically, when the first legal team gave them the support to get, we also made available psychosocial support, and also Advocate Williams and our legal team also connected them with NGOs who are really amazing in supporting victims of gender-based violence. So they have also, I'm not sure whether they've used them or not, but they've also been made available to them. I then want to the Honourable Sean August say one other thing, and he asks about when did I first hear about it, and this links to also what the Honourable Lekker says and also what the Honourable Dugmore says. And I've heard these comments a number of times. Now I will say it here, the first time I heard of it was in November. I then said this is how I will deal with it, and I need the detail and I will deal with it, and I've shown that I have. But I've heard these comments about this has been known before. In actual fact, the Honourable August, there's a member of his party who used to be in this House, actually publicly said, I knew about it. Well, I want to say now, through you to that member, why didn't you phone me? Even if you didn't have the detail, could say, listen, you know, this is a person in a very serious senior position looking after safety of our people. Why didn't he phone me? What did he do about it? I want to ask the Honourable Dugmore and the Honourable Lekker as well, because they're saying this. If they have detail, you don't have to bring it to me. Do you know that the PC, our Provincial Police Commissioner, has opened a case? Got nothing in it, 0. This would be great. Take the detail that you got and land it in that case for investigation right now. That would be the perfect thing to do, if you don't want to bring it to me. But if you know other detail, please, you know, if we are serious in dealing with this issue, let's get serious in dealing with this issue. Then I want to say, I think the Honourable Marais, I think the answer from our legal representative has already given you on the review process. I think, again, it's in order for me to make a decision based on suitability to serve in the cabinet of this government for the people of this province. And that has been my decision. Obviously, this process, I've said from the beginning, it needs to make sure there's audi alteram partem. Advocate Williams has said that, you know, she's given Albert Fritz and his legal team, they've had a number of times, they've been given stuff to comment on, etc. Obviously, if he wants to take my decision on review, that's his right. He can take it on review or anything, but that's his right, and he must follow those processes. And of course, then we must deal with whatever comes out of those processes. I'm not worried about that, because I need to be able to make that decision. And I think you're also right. I could have made the decision without it, but I also believe in due process. You know, these were very serious allegations against a colleague that I'd worked with for many years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and I had to make sure that there was due process. And of course, that's how I ended up with my decision. The Honourable Botha. So I'll let the DG talk about that, because some of your questions that you ask is about accommodation, and that is the secondary process that is running. I have actually had a report back that process is on the go. First of all, we know that there were 4 individuals suspended. They are also going through a process at the moment, but we've also asked for the detail. What places were booked? Who paid for what? Was alcohol bought on the state's account, or was it on private account? We're asking all of those questions. They are also being interrogated. to make sure that we've got that side. And that's the head of department, the DG, our legal team, and our forensics teams are busy on that. I think the Honourable Lecker, I think the same thing that I said earlier. If you've got detail, please make sure that you hand the detail. You don't have to give it to me. You can give it to the police. The police are waiting. The Honourable Karma, I think there again, at the moment, you spoke about the charges and what I can do with the actual document. So that again was an issue that I raised in the meeting when I was with Advocate Williams and the 4 individuals. Obviously, there are more individuals involved, but with the 4, to say to them, however we can support you, whatever we can do, because obviously the next stage is not whether you laid these or you made these allegations for me to make up my mind around a minister in my cabinet. What's the next stage? And as I said, the PCs, I've already met with the PC. You already said we've got the docket ready, but we need some substance in the docket. And we've advised, and the individuals actually have to do that themselves. We will support them wherever they need, and we've offered NGO support as well for wherever they need to get those charges in. I think, as I explained, these are difficult things. And, sometimes even of the 4 individuals, I mean, there was almost sort of, I don't know if I should even be here. I'm so scared, I'm going to leave. And that's when we had to say, listen, we are here to look after you. We are here to protect you. We need to make sure that justice is served here. Please, I want everyone to understand that we have to protect the victims. We have to protect the complainants. That's what we have to do. And this next stage is going to be difficult for them as well. But part of it is with their consent. As soon as they've laid a charge with their consent, I will be able to then take the portions of the document and hand it to the police as well. But they also, it's been explained to them by the advocate that they have to also give their consent. Just like they gave their consent to the advocate to say, this is what you can send from my side to Albert Fritz and his legal team so that they can give an answer to it. Honourable Malakaya, I think the advocate, victims, I think again, as Nika Boshoff has now said, Advocate Boshoff said that support from the beginning. Also, we are busy having a look at, obviously, people that are outside of our employ is different to people inside of our employ, but what kind of support can we give them in the processes going forward? And we have been doing that since day one. And then, Chair, you asked about the poor officials, so I'll then hand over to the DG.
Chair, thank you for the questions. Maybe just to connect to what the Premier said. Obviously, the issue around payments, accommodation, and whatever other expenditure has taken place, that will be the subject of a separate investigation. And I mean, I will also engage with the relevant department to get that process actually going. So it's about who paid for what, as the Premier said, where did this expenditure take place, and then maybe also just to connect to maybe respond to what Member Botha asked. Any ministry in this government is part of a department. So whether you incur certain expenditure in a ministry, that gets reflected overall in the department. There are different program managers dealing obviously with different programs, but obviously it forms part of the entire expenditure. On the officials that's been suspended, precautionally, I mean, those officials remain suspended. I mean, those allegations are currently being investigated. I can also report that that investigation is in advanced stage. Chair, obviously, you can realize that, I mean, it's not something that is just static. I mean, there are many witnesses obviously coming forward, providing evidence, etc., and all of these must be investigated. Also, given due process, allow also, those that are implicated to also respond, to some of these matters. So I can report here, Chair, it's ongoing. I mean, it's 4 officials that's been placed on precautionary suspension within the Department of Community Safety. My team, Employee Relations, is running with the investigations. We do it in terms of the Western Cape government policy, because these officials, although they work in a ministry or in the department, they are employed in terms of the Public Service Act. And once that investigation is completed, obviously we will go through all the different processes. And in fact, the plan is actually to deal with that swiftly during this month still. Thanks.
Member Kama, are you raising a point of order?
No, Chair, is a hand for the next round.
I will note you very soon. Advocate Pillay, is there any comment from you at this stage before we wrap up this round?
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I think just a few comments. Firstly, I want to assure the committee that as the Department of Community Safety, there's zero tolerance in relation to any wrongdoing or acts of irregularity as far as this is concerned. Our internal control unit has already been checking accommodation claims, use of GG vehicles, etc. They've been working closely with the Provincial Forensic Security Services as well, and together with the employee relations, as the DG has alluded to, and that information is then being passed on to employee relations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, HOD members. What I will do now, we are doing well for time. It is now 11.
Chairperson.
I will note you now, Member Lecker. Just give me one moment.
Thank you.
Because what I will do now is that I will take a round of if there's any question that was not answered in your view, but I will give you between 30 seconds and 1 minute. Let's keep it brief. We have already ventilated and made our remarks, etc. But before I take the round, Member Lecker, do you have a point of order? I have noted Member Lecker's hand, and it's likely that she's wanting to ask a follow-up question as well. I see Member Dugmore.
Can you hear me, Chair?
We can hear you now, yes.
Can I come in?
Do you have a point of order?
Yes.
What is your point of order?
My point of order, Chair, is on me being misrepresented by the Premier, saying I said I have information. I said, yeah, clearly members of the Democratic Alliance have got information that we from the different political parties do not have. I didn't say I have information. That's what I want to place on record and raise a point of order on what the Premier has said, because it is a misrepresentation. Thank you.
Member Lecker, I also vaguely heard where you made mention of that, but I will take Member Bartman and then the Premier.
Chair, I do want you to assist and guide us in this matter, because if there are members who either knew about this and didn't come forward, or if Member Lecker has information about members who knew about something and doesn't come forward, then she must provide the information only to the Premier. Yes, and to conduct committee.
Member Batman must not make reference, even though I've raised an order. I've raised an order. She must not make reference to me.
I've already noted you. You have spoken. You will be we will be muting you for a moment as Member Bartman is still on the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As I was saying, so if there is information that persons have known, or if members, such as Member Lecker, maybe she knows, I don't know, because she has mentioned this now, then she must bring it to yourself, she must bring it to the Premier, and she must bring it to Conduct Committee as well. Because if the person she's mentioning is a member of this House, then it also relates to the Conduct Committee and the rules that apply to the WCPP. So I would please like you to either guide us in this regard, because that is a very serious allegation that cannot go without the details coming forward. Thank you.
Premier, thank you so much. Member Lecker, earlier on during your questions, I have noted and I heard vaguely a mention to DA members and of knowing, etc. I do want to state on the record and ask, are you able to clarify the comments that you made earlier, please, before we proceed?
Chair. I'm now saying it for the third time. I said I must not be misrepresented because all I said was clearly in this meeting we are hearing things that I want to believe that members from the opposition parties do not have information to, while DA members have got privy. And that was in reference to what Member Bota said when she said there's going to be other witnesses that would come out. And that was in reference to it. I never said I have information. And if you have problems with the recollection of what I said, I would advise you to listen to the Hansard and make a decision based on that one.
Thank you
The
so
he
much.
say, she said, I dispute it and listen to the Hansard and hear what I said.
Thank you so much, Member Lekker. I take your point. For the record, members, Member Lekker confirmed that she has not cast any aspersions on any member of this House or any DA member of knowing information with regard to the allegations. And I do want to state for the record as well that in following and in listening clearly to members, I listened to Member Bota's question, and I can ask Member Botha to confirm that it was in the light of, generally speaking, broadly speaking, that there will be more members of society that might not want to come forward, and not necessarily with regard to the former Minister Albert Fritz. And I'm sure that Member Botha would be able to confirm that. We will proceed. It is now 11:31. Let's keep it at 1 minute. I've seen in order Member Christians, Member August, Member Kama, Member Dagmore, Member Lekker. Is there any, this is for follow-up questions, clarity-seeking questions. Let's keep it to a minute in that order. And Member Bartman.
Thank you, Chair. Is it my time? Thank you, Chair. Just, it's very difficult. I fail to understand that there's a couple of things that I don't understand. The first thing is that why did the people come to the Premier and not to the police? That for me is troubling. Secondly, we know this is not a court of law. So it was a fact-finding mission. I want to know what was the cost of this investigation, because surely it would have been cheaper doing it in the department of the Premier. It's because, you know, it's a fact-finding mission. It's not. I believe taxpayers' money was not spent well. So that is important. The other thing that's mind-boggling to me is pictures of the alcohol at the venue. So is this not a setup? You understand what I'm saying? It was said there was pictures of the alcohol at the venue, and then pictures of the venue. So alcohol at the venue means pictures was taken then. So that for me doesn't count. The other thing that I'm not understanding when it comes to all of this. If it started at 2018, why will the person only come on now? Surely, if it's not the Premier, some other people had to know about these type of things. You know. So for me, it doesn't add up. And I want the Premier to please explain to us how did they get photos of the alcohol at the venue? Because they were drinking at that time. So surely there's something fishy there. So that is just, I cannot understand. And that's why I still agree they can take out the names. We need to see the report, because we getting stories from the one side and the other side. And now, as a committee, we sitting here with a report, with a summary that doesn't do justice. And we want to know, we know the length of the report now. So what was the cost for the taxpayer when it comes to this report? Thank you.
Thank you so much, members. I'm going to slightly amend my resolution from earlier on. I'm going to make it for 2 minutes. I wanted to give Member Christians, because you went over 1 minute now. We wouldn't want to stifle our discussions here today, so we're going to keep it to 2 minutes. But for this round, exactly at 2 minutes, if you are still speaking, I will then interject and request that you stop speaking. So Member August.
Chairperson, thank you. Earlier on, you said if your question has not been answered, you'll give 30 seconds to a minute. I've raised my hand. You didn't see me, so please allow me some time. Yeah, thank you. So my first or earlier question was, Was there any CCMA cases reported? Has the province known about any CCM cases over the last period of years? That's the one. The Premier has not responded to that specific question. Then two, I hear some of the victims is no longer working for the department. I don't know the details. I just want to know, those victims, were they employed by the provincial legislator? Why have their contract been terminated? Has it not been renewed? Were they not victimized and too scared to apply again? Are they now unemployed? Is the provincial legislator able to look into those conditions to perhaps re-employ, should that be the reason why the individuals, I don't know how many, is not working for the Western Cape anymore? Thank you.
August, you have another minute, sir. Thank you. That is how we engage. Thank you so much. We now have Member Kama.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I think I must mention that I fully agree with the Premier, and I appreciate, the need to protect the victims from what is called secondary victimization. Now, the question that I'm asking, Chair, should be understood that the act that I'm talking about was influenced by resolutions of a summit that sat with different organizations that the Premier is also talking about, which support victims of gender-based violence. And the act in section 54 puts an obligation on a person who has knowledge, reasonable belief, or suspicion that a sexual offense has been committed against a child or persons who is vulnerable as defined in the broadened definition of the vulnerable group. Now, what I'm asking to the Premier or even the legal department is, was the Premier advised in this aspect, so that we understand, because there might be a possibility of the Premier having an obligation to go and report to a police official, because he has said that he received affidavits. So he has information of a possible sexual misconduct, and that must be criminally investigated by the police. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Dagmo.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, it was the advocate herself who used the words intimidation and factions. Those were the words that she used. And her response was then that she'll give you the numbers. What I want to ask her is to describe to us, what was the nature of the conversation? What did the person call? What did they say when they called exactly? How many calls did she get? And did any of the callers identify themselves? And what did she mean when she said factions? Because all she did now is say that she'll give you the telephone numbers. So could we just have some detail on that? And then I would like to ask, can the Premier tell us who the third person is? Was it JP Smith? What is the Premier's knowledge of JP Smith's involvement in this? Because one would imagine that if these were issues related to the province, that someone would approach an MPL. So why did someone approach JP Smith? What in particular was JP Smith's role, and who was the third person that actually briefed you? The name of the person, or is it a councillor, MPL, official? Who was that third person who initiated the process? And then if you can just, so Premier, you giving us the absolute assurance that you'd never heard a rumor from the time when Albert Fritz was appointed as the MEC for Community Safety. So the first time you ever heard any rumor, let alone allegation, was November of 2021. If you could just confirm that. And then I would like to ask the DG that he has reported that 4 staff members have been suspended. Could he explain to us why? Because we're looking at a consistent policy, and we would also like this committee, I would recommend to get the GBV policy of this provincial government. Why, when in a situation regarding the Department of Transport with Mr. Farrell Payne, who's criminally charged, why was that person not suspended compared to allegations here where 4 members of community safety were suspended? Can he explain from his, as the head official here, why was Farrell Payne then not suspended?
Thank you so much. I really had high hopes for the 2 minutes there, Member Dagmo. Member Lekker, I see you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, allow me to establish at least 2 or 3 facts in relation to how the matter, particularly of the affidavit, was handled. I want to get an understanding when the affidavits were received from whoever, I wouldn't say the victims, but let me just put it like that. When the affidavits were received, how were the affidavits circulated to the relevant parties, i.e. Advocate Williams? Was it by way of email or rather also how many copies were made and to whom were those affidavits were given in respect of handling confidential information as it is? Because for me, I would find it difficult that Advocate Williams would be intimidated after having been tasked with this responsibility. And so I really want to establish as to how was the information disseminated to those relevant parties. Maybe lastly, and where were those persons that were interviewed at, exactly where the location was, so that we can get to understand whether indeed even those that were interviewed, their safety was protected at all material times. Thank you.
Member Bartman.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, last year, I think it was last year or the year before, the implementation of the Protection of Personal Information Act also came into play in South Africa. So I just want to find out from Advocate Williams what the impact is of this legislation on a case such as this, obviously because there's so much personal details involved in such a case. I also want to find out whether there's any implication in terms of labor relations legislation, because it is my understanding that there's a difference with dealing with officials in terms of labor legislation in comparison to an elected official who is appointed in terms of discretion of the Constitution. And then, Chair, I just want to find out from Advocate Williams whether it is her view that the release of specific information would have legal prejudice either towards the former MEC or any of the complainants in the matter, should there be a future court case in this regard, whether there's a legal duty upon the Western Cape government to thus protect the information of the complainants, and whether even at a court, I know, for example, in the children's court, and I'm not sure how it would apply here, but whether a court may even have the view or take the decision that even if it does go to court, that they have a right to decide whether or not that could be dealt with in camera. I just wanted to know what the process would be. Court processes, should there be one. And then just finally, to the Premier, what will the steps be for the Western Cape government going forward to make sure that that when whistleblowers, for lack of a better word, come forward in cases such as these, that it's dealt with swiftly in the future as well. Thanks.
It was a perfect 2 minutes. I see Member Maseko.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've been covered, but just maybe 1 or 2 questions, or maybe a comment of Member Christian about the cost that is attached to the GB fee. I think it's really not fair to the victims, to the effect that you can never attach that. And I think this case is sort of a framework to the way forward within our government structures of allowing the victims, if they are there, to come forward knowing that they are protected. So whatever, to me, personally, I feel whatever it takes to protect the victims, it has to happen irrespective of the cost, because this is a pandemic. And if we can set up the system that will be doable, that will be useful for the communities out there, that in fact they can come out, they will be protected for this scourge of pandemic to be dealt with. We have to do that. There's too many people that are dying. There's too many people that really commit suicide because they've gone through some of the things that we hear that they are happening. So the cost is not the issue here. The issue is how do we handle the issues that has to do with the GBV. And a second one, it will be, Chair, I am listening, and with due respect, I respect all of you, my colleagues. I'm listening to a lot of men talking about GBV, becoming technical about things that those women have gone through, that they are not even sensitive to deal with those issues. They are lawmakers. They have to make sure those women, they are protected. They have to make sure that other women that are outside are going to be protected. It's so disturbing to listen to how they are becoming technical in trying to. I thought when we came to the meeting, we are trying to get a framework of how are we going to move forward to make sure that this have to be dealt with accordingly and for the future. So that's my
Member
take,
Maseko, your
and
time
thank
is
you
up.
very much.
I have a point of order. Your time is up, Member Maseko. Member Syed.
Chairperson, on a point of order, Chair. Member Maseko is inferring that the men who are trying to do their oversight are being technical and thus being insensitive around these issues of GBV. Can she maybe elaborate and give some examples of who are these men and what exactly have they said that is technical in nature and is seemingly problematic? Thank you. Because so that we can engage and so that that practice doesn't happen, you know? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Member Syed. What I will move forward is that I do know that in terms of where we are discussing extremely serious matters, and I'm delighted that the complainants are receiving the help and they've been offered the help. We know this is serious stuff. I wouldn't want us to allow a comment from Member Maseko in this time to disrupt the flow. And I would want us to proceed. Member Maseko used her 2 minutes to provide her input and her questions. And I trust that we as men in this house, if the shoe doesn't fit, wat sê gesegde, as die skoen nie pas nie, dan trek ons hom nie aan nie. So I trust that we will be able to, I trust that we will be able to proceed. But I do value you raising that. As this house and as members of this house, I firmly believe that each one of us remain committed to fighting GBV. Member Malikaya.
Thanks, Chair. I think my previous question was not responded to by the Premier. On the issue of the Advocate Williams, was the Premier aware that there are aims to defeat the ends of justice in intimidating Advocate Williams to continue with the investigation? And what is the Premier, as a person, as a source of the institution of this process, done to ensure that the advocate is prevented? And then the second question that I asked is that, did the victims in the process of investigation, where they found maybe to have unfairly benefited through this process? Because we all know that when a predator of the sexual predator is embarking on such a practice, is definitely would want to woo somebody in order to gain something. Were they given jobs in order for them to collaborate with the process, so that we would know that and monitor such a conduct going forward? Because our people are vulnerable and they want jobs. Did that previous MEC make sure that they benefit unfairly in the processes of job seeking? Thanks very much.
And the last member for this round is Member Mare.
Thank you so much, Chair. The name that comes up often is JP. I don't think I need to say his surname. And that question wasn't answered. Now, this happened to be a person who can show ambition to be elevated from safety at metro level to safety at provincial level. And I must quote you what Julius says about such men. He says, As he was valiant, I honor him, but as he was ambitious, I slew him. Maybe the Premier should say that who is to be slewed if it's going to be proven that the bearer of bad tidings and news what happened to be this JP.
Marais, before you proceed, may I just interject quickly? I am aware, and like members know here, the question was asked. The Premier did not have an opportunity to answer as yet because we are still dealing with the question.
I'm giving the question some facts.
But I would want us to be cautious.
You
are raising, the question was merely asked by Member Dagmo, but you are adding meat to it, which borders on, you are now talking about his character is not here to defend himself.
I make a point of order. I never mentioned, there's a lot of people whose initials start with JP. Did you tell me that I mentioned a specific JP?
We are going to go in circles, sir. So are you able to wrap up in terms of the questions?
If you don't interject, I will wrap up.
Because it is very serious stuff that we are addressing here.
Right. I'm saying that the Honorable Leader of the Opposition asked a question regarding a certain JP. I don't know his surname. I'm asking, is it true that that was the bearer of the bad news to the Premier, which resulted in this investigation? And then I want to ask also Advocate Williams. She said she was intimidated, and I asked, were you intimidated by those who support the defense or those who brought the application? And to what extent could this have influenced this level of intimidation, her conclusions to the evidence? How much weight would the advocate put on evidence from either side if he or she felt intimidated? Thank you.
Much, Member Marais. Member Lekker, you have already had your 2 minutes. Is that a point of order?
It's a point of order, Chair. Can I come in?
By all means, we are listening.
Chairperson.
You may speak.
Chairperson.
You may speak. We can hear
Thank
you.
you, Chairperson. All right. Thank you, Chair. My Honorable Chair, I think there has been an error in the ruling that you have just made in relation to what Member Marais has said. According to the rule, if one is not a member of this House, you really don't necessarily have any grounds to it, because JP or whoever JP is, there is no JP in the provincial parliament. So I think the ruling there was rather irrelevant. That's my order, Chair.
Thank you so much, Member Lekker. It was more direction in order for us to move forward. It was more direction for us to move forward. We are getting to a point where we would want the answers, and I wouldn't want sideshows to come in where we are making comments and talking, but we would want to deal with the questions, bearing in mind that I would strictly want to end at 12:30. But I see Member Dagmo and then Member Syed.
No, Chair, just the point of order that I wanted to raise, my understanding of where we are now is to try and pick up on issues that were not responded to. I know the one issue was from where were the young women recruited from, because there's reference to from poor communities. There's been a lot of speculation also about they're mainly from Mitchell's Plain. So that issue. And then I just want to clarify, I'm actually talking about the MACO member, JP Smith, the person who alleged to have an honours degree from the University of Stellenbosch, but didn't.
Thank you so much, and the Premier will be answering that question. Member Syed, I trust that you are covered.
To caution, Chair, I know it's not easy chairing such a session, Chair. And we are here to actually assist. So it's not an issue of sideshows. I think when members are posing the questions, and not only the questions, but when they're giving clarity and trying to protect what certain members are able to say, it's so that the nature of discussions and the responses we get can actually contribute to ensuring that this matter is dealt with, that this matter is dealt with properly, and that we exhaust our time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate, Premier, this committee, there's maturity where we work together. So thank you so much. Members, it is now 11:54. I'm going to allow the Premier to answer all the follow-up questions. And depending on where we are then, I will then provide further direction in moving forward. I do know that this was an urgent meeting. We are not taking it lightly, and that members do have other commitments that they've already cancelled or shifted in order for us to engage urgently today. So on that note, we will proceed with Premier, and if you want to bring the team in, anyone, that will be under your direction, sir.
Thank you very much. Honourable Christians, thank you. Why come to me and not the police? I have no idea. I mean, that is a good question. Why do people want to come to me? You know, and I really can't answer that. The costs, could it have been cheaper in the department? I want to say, I mean, obviously we'll give you whatever the full costs are at the end of this process. The committee will get that. But I also want to say that, you know, when this thing first comes, and there's a lot of politics in this, to make sure that it's seen as proper, fair process, and that politics doesn't play a role, and that, you know, I'm doing it absolutely beyond reproach. We've got to be fair, audi ultram partem. The best thing to do is get an independent investigator, not do it within the department, because the first thing I would have been said was, oh, but it's your department investigating. So I want to say that we'll get you the costs, but it definitely was the right decision to have an independent investigator to do this. Based on just we all sitting here in this room, we need to make sure that it's above reproach. You asked 2018 and why only now? Again, I don't know. But what I have learned in this last while, that it is very difficult for someone who is in a, I want to say, a power relationship, where you've got someone in charge and someone within or a subordinate. It is very difficult for that subordinate to come forward. I mean, that is absolutely evident. And it'll get to some of the answers on some of the other questions just now about I think it was Honourable August, about the two people that came forward. The reason they came forward is they'd moved on from that departmental relationship or that power play relationship, and they were working in other places. And so they weren't held captive. And so, you know, why only now? I mean, I don't know. I really don't know, but I think that's probably the reason. And we need to ask ourselves a question. One of the questions here was, we are legislators, you know, this place makes laws. We should look at this and say, how do we find ways, because the current system is problematic. People are obviously finding it very difficult when these things happen to come forward. The question about photos and venues, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't, I had the allegations that maybe Advocate Williams can answer the questions about the photos and venues. But of course, those are part of the questions. People would have brought their evidence, and the evidence would have had to have been corroborated. Yeah, I think those are the questions. Honourable August, CCMA, not that I know of. I actually had a look at it. I don't think we've got any information. I don't know of any case like this that's gone to the CCMA. Yeah. I think in respect of the minister, it wouldn't go to the CCMA anyway. CCMA wouldn't be the place that you would take. Okay, or well, the advocate could also answer, but as far as we know, I don't know of anything. Not at all. Then you asked a whole lot of questions about the victims no longer working at the legislature. Were their jobs terminated? I think I sort of started to answer that. I think the first one person that came forward was not in the employ any longer. They'd moved on and got another job. And that probably gave them the power to think about coming forward. And then when they found the second person, that person had also moved on. I can tell you that in the first 4 female women that I met in this process, 4 women, 2 men, 2 of the women were still in the employ, were in or are in still in the ministry or the department. And they're the ones that are totally petrified. And that's the conclusion that I've got, is that, you know, when you are captive in this space, it's very, very difficult to come forward. But I can assure you that the other 2 weren't terminated, or they actually have moved on. They've got jobs in other places. So there's no need of contract or termination of contract or anything. The Honourable Karma, I can't really answer the Act 54. I don't know if Boshoff can. I understand the obligation, of course, if I'm given this information, but that was why I specifically, after the report, asked to meet with the 4 initial victims that had come to me with the complaints, with their allegations, and specifically to say to them, the report is now completed. The next step would be to lay a charge, and with their permission, once we've got to that stage, I would then make myself available, and I would actually be able to make the report available. And I still say that, and will be able to do that if they give me permission. And even if one gives me permission, I will use that component and say, all right, can I take that component and hand it to the police to aid an investigation? The Honourable Dugmore, you referred to JP Smith. The answer is yes, it was JP Smith. I'll tell you now, I got a phone call to say he has heard an allegation. I said to him, you can't tell me a third-party allegation. You need to say to that person, give me the allegation. I said to him, the allegation is against someone in my cabinet. I need the allegation, and I need that person to give it to me. You can't give it to me because I can't act on that. That was on the 23rd of November. On the 24th of November, I met JP face-to-face. I didn't have a special meeting set up. We were at a cabinet Mako meeting, and at the lunch break I went and spoke to him, and I said to him, JP, if someone brings this to you, obviously you can deal with it yourself, but maybe the person dealing with safety and security, I don't know, but if they want me to deal with it because the allegation is against someone in my cabinet, they need to please bring it to them. Please, will you tell them that I need the information? Will they bring it to me? And the best thing to do would be to actually put it in writing and come and see me. And that's exactly what it did. And then I said, and if that's the case, you're not involved. And that's where it ended. And that was then the process. The message I got is she was speaking to a lawyer, putting it in writing, and then she spoke to a second person who also put it in writing, and they met me on the 14th of January. That was the first time that I met with her, the first allegation that was raised via JP, and of course the second person was not via JP. Obviously that was via the first complainant, who then got someone else to say, listen, are you prepared to come forward as well? And so that's how the second one came forward. And the first time I met with them and engaged with them was on the 14th, and then the process over the next 7 days unfolded with obviously the detail that they brought in added to that detail. And I will again categorically state that that is exactly how it happened, and I had not heard of these allegations before the 23rd on that phone call from JP Smith. First time I heard of it, and dealt with it 24th face-to-face, and 14th, that was when the process started. Then Honourable Lecker, okay, now I suppose, yeah. First of all, you spoke about the affidavits. I personally don't have a copy of any of the first 2 that came to see me. I don't have those copies because they were handed over to the legal team. So I don't have a copy of what they wrote down. And of course, that would have been part of what was handed over to Advocate Williams. That was the first 2, and that kicked off the process of making sure there was legal and how do we get the further names that they were raising into the room. We ended up with 4+2 corroboration in those 7 days. I don't have any of those documents myself because they were all handed over what I saw initially. And of course, I wasn't even part of those interviews. I just met them. And I can tell you that they had full legal support from the first day onwards from our legal team in the process. I also had then that legal advice on every step that I took. And I can assure you that the venue that we met them at was a venue that they would not have been seen, or it was done in a way that they could do it safely. I can assure you of that. Then I can't, I think advocates, or one of the advocates can answer the labor relations question from the Honourable Bartman. I think part of your question is, and that's something that we need to apply our mind to. I know I'm already applying my mind to it, and that is the future. GBV. It's evident, and I've said it now a few times, that it's very difficult for people to come forward. And we need to apply our minds to this. I know that in government, we need to apply our minds to this. What processes are in place? Because I think the Honourable Christian's question was, why didn't they go straight to the police? Why did they come to me? Why didn't they go to an NGO? Why didn't they go to, while they were in the employ of this government, to the GBV champion in their department? Every one of our departments have got GBV champions. Why didn't they go? We need to ask these questions. What do we need to do differently? What do businesses, because I mean, we must also understand this is not only unique to us. This is a problem that we have in our country. How are businesses dealing it when it's a CEO relationship with a subordinate? And how are we? And that's something that I think we all need to apply our minds to. As legislators, we need to apply our minds to it. What are the regulatory environments that enable protection, et cetera, et cetera? How do they look? We all need to be thinking about it. I absolutely agree. The Honourable Maseko, I think the same thing. You're the one that said we are lawmakers. And absolutely, I think we all need to be applying our minds to this. The Honourable Malakaya, Advocate Williams. Okay, you asked about what did I do about intimidation. I must say that I was sitting here the first time that I heard the advocate say it was when she was on the screen looking at us from here. I didn't know that she'd received any of these calls up until now. Then the victims unfairly dismissed. I think at the moment, as I've already said, and I don't know all the victims because I think there are other victims that have come forward that are, unnamed. I don't even know who they are. But as far as I know, as I already said, the first two are not in employ of this government. And the others, as the way I understand, are in the employ and are either under contract or they are actually in the government at the moment. So they haven't been. And then the question around whether they were unfairly given jobs, or I don't know that. I can't answer that question. The Honourable Marais, I think you reiterated the question about JP. It was JP that alerted me to the fact on that day, the 23rd, by phone, and then I spoke to him face-to-face on the 24th, and that led to this process. Also saying, is that perhaps, and this is maybe, there's a whole lot of questions around political manipulation, etc. Well, maybe if there was one person and one case, but I mean, with 6 people that I met, and I know other people, I don't think this is a political process or a political manipulation. This is a far more serious issue that we are dealing with here, and this is about making sure that there's justice, that gender-based violence is dealt with decisively, and that people are given a proper platform in order to deal with this, and there are consequences. I think, definitely the answer is, are there anything is going to kind of like influence the investigation, or definitely not. It was not going to be, would not allow any of those kind of processes to influence an investigation. The investigation must follow its course. I think that's it. I don't know if Advocate Boshoff or Advocate Williams wants to add anything.
Yeah, just briefly on the Section 54 question, that section relates only to sexual offences against minors or people with mental disabilities. So that's where that positive obligation to report arises from. And given the age of the complainants, it doesn't apply.
Thank you so much. Advocate Williams, is there any comment from you at this stage?
Just to clarify the issue about the so-called intimidation, I did not receive any calls from anybody. I said what I received were text messages. And while they may have been intended to make me stop the investigation, it did not influence me or intimidate me in any way. In fact, they made a mistake and sent them to a couple of the wrong advocates at the bar first before they sent them to me, and those people phoned me in a panic. But I'm, you know, big girl and I'm experienced, so I'm not worried about these things. I just blocked the messages. I don't think I said anything about factions. If I did, that was something odd. But what I said was it could have been from anybody, from any political party. I don't know, which is why I then said I'll forward the messages to the chairperson of the committee. Some of them were anonymous, some of them gave their names, but I've got all the numbers. And I think it may have just been a small group of 3 or 4 people who just messaged me every now and then when they saw something in the media. I didn't mention it to the Premier or to the State Attorney or anyone because, as I said, it didn't influence me in any way. I did, however, make a joke of it when I met with MEC Fritz and his advocate. And that was sort of, you know, the extent of it. I think it's a bit of a red herring here, and I don't think we need to concern ourselves. The question of the photos of the venues, I'm not sure I understood. Is it being implied that because there's a photo of a venue that this was a conspiracy? That would be incorrect. Some of the photos were obtained recently, and some of them were videos just in order to resolve factual disputes. So, for example, I say I was standing there and you say you were standing there and the table was facing this way, so you couldn't have been standing there. Well, it was easy to get a picture of the table and the venue to be able to see who was standing where and how. They weren't all obtained because of or at the complainant's behest. Some of them are obtained, in fact, to clarify MEC Fritz's version in one particular incident. The photos of the alcohol, I'm afraid that young people these days document their lives on social media. And this is what they did. They took photos of the parties. They took photos of the places where they drank. And in many cases, they told me they have never traveled before or stayed at such a nice venue. They took photos of the venues. And where they had these, I was provided with them. And where they didn't, you know, they didn't have them. So I know in one case, in order to establish a particular venue, I actually went on the internet and we Googled the hotel and the entertainment areas and the pool, and the complainant then showed me exactly where the venue had happened. This was done because MEC Fritz was concerned that he wasn't given clarity exactly where things had happened. And so part of the reasoning was to provide him with those photos to say, well, this is the exact spot where it is alleged that A, B, and C occurred. So I wouldn't draw any inference of a conspiracy that the complainants had pictures of the alcohol or the venues. And some of them, as I say, were actually obtained during the course of the investigation just to clarify factual disputes which could be easily resolved without having to rely on witnesses, but could objectively be resolved. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Advocate Williams. 12, 13 members. What I will do at this stage, before I take a hand, what I will do at this stage, we do have an opportunity for our discussion in terms of our actions, request for information and resolutions. I am going to ask any member at this stage, is there any last comment that you want to make? Member Dugmore, just wait. Member Dugmore?
Yes, Chair. No, it was just that I asked a specific question to the DG, the issue of policy, because I think what the Premier is alluding to is the need for us to look at policy consistency around how we deal with GBV in the administration, how whistleblowers and complainants can come forward. And the issue for me is if one looks at how this was dealt with compared to the issue of the Chief Director of Transport, Mr. Farrell Payne. So I'd like to, that's why I'm asking the DG in terms of current policy, because the DG also indicated that they're dealing with 4 officials that they've already suspended them. Whereas Mr. Payne is facing criminal charges, but he remains in office. So why is there a policy discrepancy in this regard?
What I will do now, members, is that I will allow the DG to answer that particular question. Thereafter, I feel that we have ventilated and we have provided sufficient time. I will then close.
One question was not answered, Chair.
I will then close the questions. And then we will then offer that opportunity for our resolutions in moving forward. Otherwise, we are going to be way over time. But I see Member Syed and then Member Lekker.
Chair, on a point of order, Chair, serious point of order, Chair. You cannot have where the Premier responds, the advocate responds on certain issues, and there's no opportunity for follow-ups. Seriously, this is a serious matter. We can't be curbed here and say no because of time. At least allow for a platform after the DG response for follow-up questions, not to say very new, but follow-up questions related to what, and then you close it. Because I think there were things that were said that require follow-ups.
That's
Thank you.
exactly the seriousness thing that I've just said now. There will be an opportunity where we are able to request that information, even in writing.
No.
Usually what we do in committees, we just give people a minute just to say, your final remarks. Yeah, just do a bit something good.
I can see you are also covered. It is now 12:16. I will definitely stop for because of seconds, and I will be this one by 4. If August, I don't you, sir. I don't you.
The chairperson is not honorable.
I just want to say thank you for the Premier for agreeing. I know there was a request from the Leader of the Opposition for such a meeting. You could agree to it. And I think that nobody can complain that they didn't ask questions until they were empty of any further questions. And whatever goes beyond today can only go to a high level, which is not our prerogative, but that of the justice system.
Member Syed.
Chair, thank you very much. I just wanted to know, Chair, in terms of the advocate, on what basis, and this question is for the advocate, based on what she has indicated now, on what basis did the advocate indicate that those threats allegedly came from people who are from various political parties? Then on the issue of Mr. Smith, I'm struggling to understand why the person who works for provincial government would go to Mr. Smith with those complaints. I just wanted to get some sense around that. Then also, for how long did Mr. Smith have this particular information? Then finally, Chair, given that there's a political context painted here, can we ask the Premier to say whether he briefed the DA FedEx on this matter or the DA leadership in the province, and what was their response and advice? Can we get a categorical assurance, Chair, that he acted alone and was not instructed or advised by the DA leadership? Thank you.
Much, Member Christians.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this meeting, because this is what we ask. I want to make it clear that we are not insensitive when it comes to GBV. It's very serious, and that's why we want to make sure that the processes are followed, and that is what we ask. Processes should be followed, and that's why I'm so adamant that this matter is so serious that it must end up in court at SAPS. You understand what I'm saying? This is the serious, but from our side as a committee, we must make sure that, when you have present a case, that we are comfortable that taxpayers' money was spent wisely. So it's not insensitive. We are very sensitive, and because it's GBV, We must ask the difficult and hard questions, but that the perpetrator is brought to book. But that is a court and that is police cells. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Dagmore.
Chair, thanks. Just because of the time, could we also just agree that all the questions that we were not able to ask, because I think we spent the first part of the meeting trying to understand the issue of why not the full report. So if we can submit those. But what I would, in addition, like to ask is, that in regard to the Premier saying that he himself, was angry in regard to what had happened, and that, this is just the beginning of the campaign against GBV. Can the Premier be very specific with us about what he believes the shortcomings are of the current GBV policy in the province, and what is actually planned in regard to deal with this?
Thank you so much, Member Dagmore. Member Maseko.
Thank you very much. Just to say thank you to the Premier and also for his support staff that have handled this case so far. And what will be more appreciated is moving forward to get the updates as the issue moves forward to an extent that we can see it ending up at the criminal court, or to make sure that that doesn't happen ever again, and to really champion the framework about the scenarios like this that mustn't ever happen on our doorsteps in future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I appreciate the fact that we're going to have to look at the rules and legislation, how to tighten up, making sure that whistleblowers and complainants are protected to the full. And I know, for example, in the USA, the legislation in that country even allows a whistleblower on corruption, for example, to even take a government to court and even to recover the money and even to keep some of the money. And while this is not exactly the same type of case, there may be some principles of this type of legislation that may apply in cases such as these. But I hope that this matter does eventually get referred to a court of law where these can be tested. And I thank the Premier and the Department for being here on such an urgent basis to reassure the public that the matter has been dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Members online, in order to make it easier, are you able to raise your hand if you have any last question for 30 seconds or a comment? I see Member Leka and Member Kama. Member Leka, you can go.
Thank you, Chair. My question has still not been answered as to in which areas were the victims from. I know there was a response to say they were from poor areas, but poor areas, there's so many of those. I would like to know a constituency where these people hail from. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Kama.
No, thank you very much, Chair. What mine, Chair, maybe it might not be responded to now, but it's for the legal department, because I think we're reading from two different documents. The act that I was reading, it's number 13 of 2021, the newly amended act, and there it's broader than what it usually said, minors and persons with disabilities, but now it has broadened to the vulnerable group. And in that very same act, the vulnerable group is explained, and that on its own it's broadened, and it even includes young women who are under 25, but it defines them as to which one of those that are under 25. So if they can have a look on that, and we can get a response in line with the questions that
Thank you so much, Member Kama. Member Malikaya.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, mine is on that issue that I find it strange that the intimidations or the intimidation towards Advocate Williams is being underplayed. And the response that we get that she's a big girl. It might be a young guy next time, and who's handling a sensitive investigation. So for us to just shove that under the carpet just like that, when somebody who's supposed to deal with an investigation of critical matters is just being sidestepped just like that. I hope the committee will deal decisively with it immediately when we receive the information, and as well as the comments that were either intending to threaten or to intimidate a person who's instituting an investigation.
Thank you so much. And last in this round, Member Botha.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I want to say thank you to the Premier and the DG for allowing us to ask these questions, because it is questions that we needed to ask. We needed to have this platform. And I'm glad that we had this platform for both the standing committees. And I trust that there are many lessons that we have learned out of this matter. But I thank the Premier for procedurally acting the way he has acted as the head of the Western Cape government. And thank you, Chair, for this platform.
Baie, dankie. Premier, DG, I'm going to allow for concluding remarks. Advocate Williams, just before I note the Premier, is there any comments from you? I hate saying 30 seconds every time, but is there any last comment from you? Advocate Williams?
No, just a point of clarity. I didn't say I knew who they were. I said they could have been from anywhere, from any political party. So just on my side, I have given indications of what I think could be useful for learnings for the future to the Premier, and I understand that they will be looking into those things. Thank you for having me, and thank you for treating this matter with the urgency and importance that it has been treated with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much to the committee. I'll just quickly do these last few answers. The question on our side was why JP from a provincial government person? Well, the person that went to JP is not working for the provincial government. That's the person that's outside. Those are the first two people that came forward. And that's part of my point, is that when you captured in the system, it's very difficult to come forward. And I think as soon as you are given that relief of another position somewhere else. So that initial person who came forward went to Alderman JP Smith in the city. I mean, I don't know why they went to that person, but then once I said, you can't be involved in this, they must send it to me, because Albert Fritz works in the cabinet of this government. Then on your question is, did I get any instruction from the FedEx? Definitely not. And perhaps also adding to that question that, you know, that my political party, that in actual fact, when the press release was sent out and the summary of the report was sent out to the media, it was sent to my party at the same time. So it wasn't as if they got any heads up on it or anything like that. That was when it was sent to them. Because definitely this is not.
I think the question was whether when you heard initially from the third party, you know, you engaged with the FedEx and what was their response, not the issue of the report. Did you brief your political leadership nationally and provincially about the fact that the chair, because Albert Fritz, as I understand, was the acting chair, the leader? That's the question. So just...
So the answer is no, but I did brief the party when I suspended the minister after I'd received the detail. So absolutely, there's definitely, you know, there's no party political influence in any of this process whatsoever. I take my job very seriously, and I take gender-based violence very seriously. The Honourable Doug Moore, you know, yeah, I was angry. I was disappointed. I've been on an emotional roller coaster for the last couple of weeks. You know, when you've worked with someone for many years and these allegations come forward, this is serious stuff, and it's difficult stuff. And, you know, well, yeah, it's difficult. You just have to do the right thing. And that's what I will always do, is the right thing. And then, what are the weaknesses? Or I've started to speak about it. I don't know what they all are. I mean, I ask myself this question a lot, and I think we all have to do that. That's what I've been saying. We need to say why, how come, what should we put in place differently that would make it easier to deal with this scourge. Then, the Honourable Lecker, I think that the advocate did answer you, but I will answer again that I don't know either, where people came from. I don't think that was part of the investigation. So where do you live? Where do you come from? So as far as I know, I mean, I don't know that detail. And I think the advocate also said in her reply that that wasn't part of her process. So I don't know that answer. Then I think the other issues, I mean, the issue raised about the law and that section, but I think I've also answered it, that as soon as I've got permission, I will hand that and even say I'll play my part, whatever I can in the investigation. And I think that really covers all of the questions to me. If I can then just say, Chair, maybe in conclusion, obviously at the end of the day, I know that people want detail of the process. The process that we've been involved in has primarily been for me to do two things. The first thing is to get an investigation into these allegations that were made and give a colleague in my cabinet a fair chance to answer those allegations. That's number one. Yeah. You also hear stories of the opposite happening, where people are victimized, and you need to make sure that that process. So that's the first thing, and the outcome of that process is for me to apply my mind. And I applied my mind when the report was given to me. In actual fact, if I have to say something out of the report, not using any of the allegations, if I park that to one side, using any of the processes or anything, if I only take the Audi Ultram Partum component of this report where Albert Fritz answered the allegations and I read his answers to the allegations, it is sufficient for me to make the decision. And the decision is, my decision is, whether I see him as a fit and proper person to serve in this cabinet, based on the allegations and his response to those allegations. That's my decision. That's mine to take. The Constitution gives me that power to take the Constitution. And that was my decision, and I've taken it. The second part is taking these serious allegations seriously and making sure that they get to follow the proper course so that justice at the end of the day is done, number one, and that in actual fact, other people who are suffering at the moment. And again, I will say it from the beginning. The start of this process where I've given my word to protect people because they are so scared of coming forward. And then, looking at the frenzy. And I want to say to the citizens of this province, next time this happens, wherever it happens, we must always think about how do we protect. I'll just say, when journalists start phoning every single person who works in the office to say, is it you? That is unacceptable. That is absolutely unacceptable. We cannot allow that kind of thing to happen, because the next person is just going to say, I'm just going to shut up and allow this to continue. Allow the abuse to continue. That is not allowed. And so I call on citizens of this province to treat this with the seriousness that it needs. People that are suffering, be strong and come forward. We need to help you to find justice. And of course, I'm making these statements in general. On this specific case, I've made my decision, and the next, of course, innocent until proven guilty, and the next process must follow its course. And I really hope that happens speedily, that we do get some charges laid, and in actual fact, that the real court can answer and deal with the issue decisively, and we get a conclusive outcome of this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Chair, maybe just to finally respond to the question, by one of the members, Member Dugmore. particularly on the issue around precautionary suspension. I mean, the Public Service Act is quite clear. Section 20 to Section 24 deals with the matters of misconduct, and precautionary suspension is one way of dealing with it. And there are basically two matters that must be considered by particularly the accounting officer or somebody that's been delegated. The employer may suspend an employee on full pay, or obviously, transfer the person if the employee is alleged to have committed a serious offense, and secondly, if the employee believes that the presence of an employee at the workplace might jeopardize any investigation into the alleged misconduct or endanger the well-being or safety of any person or state property. So that decision, that call to make, entirely sits at an AO level. But even if a person is suspended, as a precautionary measure, it does not constitute a judgment on the matter. So in this case, the accounting officer for the Department of Community Safety has considered all the facts before, have looked at, let's call it all the matters, and I have taken a decision to precautionary suspend them. Obviously, we need to have the hearing within a period of 60 days, and that's why I said, this matter is at the point where we're going to have to deal with it this month. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Members of this committee, together with.
So in other words, in regard to Farrell Payne, that decision not to suspend someone who's facing criminal charges is an HOD decision of the Department of Transport. Then I would like to ask the Premier, he says he's angry about this. Can he understand the anger of people who feel that someone is in court and that the victim is at home, yet that person is still in the office? Can he understand their anger, and does he support the decision which the HOD of Transport made in this regard?
Thank you so much, Member Dagmo. On that note, I do want to thank the Premier, the DG, together with Advocate Boshoff. Thank you so much to Advocate Jennifer Williams for your attendance under extremely short notice. I'm delighted that you have taken the time to engage us, your willingness. Members, thank you so much for offering up your time. We understand that this is extremely serious matters. So, baie dankie, thank you so much. Wasim Matthews, Mary Ann Burgess, every member online, the media, thank you so much that you are here, PMG, and all our other stakeholders. Thank you so much. This meeting is now adjourned, but members will remain. I will excuse the Premier and the department, and the members will stay for 5 minutes just for committee business. Thank you so much. En baie dankie vir die inwoners van die Weskaap.
Thank you. Thank you, DG. Thank you, Premier. Thank you. Yes, I'd like to start, if that's okay, but I'd like to make recommendations.
Just give me 1 moment, Member Dagmo.
But the media doesn't have to leave. You haven't closed the meeting.
No, they are fine if they want to stay. So, members, I will encourage you to keep it as short as possible. It is already 12:38. So I will start on my far left again. Member Sean August, Member Peter Marais, any recommendation from you? Request for information. Member Syed, any information from you?
I was ready. Why are you putting pressure on them?
Member Christian.
I'll be covered by the.
We have asked for a detailed cost analysis of this case, and I want to know what it cost the province in respect of this investigation. And secondly, again, I think we need to understand that we need to get that report. We don't need the names, but yet again, you get stories in the media. There's names being mentioned in the media already, you know. But I don't want names. We want to know the report, and I think we as a committee we entitled for that report. And maybe just the last thing, Chairperson, I believe they were, you know, I still believe that this case must go to SAPS, and what is the processes being followed to get it to SAPS and to the court. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Member.
My brain has just lit up after I heard Member. I just want to say that thank you, members. This committee has the right to subpoena anybody to appear before us. And any questions that's unanswered today, we must reserve the right to call them. If there's any additional information which we as a committee and the leader of the opposition asked, and we're not satisfied, I want this chairman to pass a resolution that this committee will meet again to decide if we want to summon anybody to appear before us and when, to give answers to questions which are still hanging in the air. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Sean August.
Yeah, before Member Dagmo goes, they've got world of experience.
I'm going to keep Member Dagmo deliberately for last.
Okay. Chairperson, this is at a very senior level of the Western Cape Provincial Legislature. What about our junior workers in this province? What will this department, the Premier and Social Development, what steps and measures can they put in place to ensure that those females are protected at all the offices, at all levels of employment? Thank you.
We have that captured.
Just let's on to that. I think an important thing is also there's people being suspended. I think we need to know about that also as well. People being suspended and there's disciplinary action taken. I think.
Thank you.
Why were they suspended? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Bartman.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a recommendation regarding how we put the resolution based on what we've already indicated. I do have a serious concern regarding any legal duty that may fall upon WCBP if we specifically request the report and then we have personal information of protection and other things that also is applicable to that. First, I would like to ask that can we please amend it to ask that WCBP assist us with the legal opinion rather on the report not being provided based on the information put forward. Because I'm not sure if I don't feel comfortable simply asking for the report just like that without making sure that there's no legal duty on WCBP to also make sure that complainants' details are protected. So if I can receive that reassurance, I would appreciate it. And I would like to support the request that we just receive an update on the internal investigation regarding the officials. My understanding is the officials would probably go through labor legislation, which is a different type of process. But and that in similar in annual reports, sometimes we only get the summaries of some of these things, or the what do you call it, the step in the process where it is at. In order to deal with the matter. So maybe if we can then get an update on the internal investigation, and I also support the request and that we receive the costs of the investigation. Yeah. But those are my suggestions, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Member Maseko, are you covered? Member Kama, I see you.
Just say, can we just have a time frame on that, on the legal opinion, that doesn't take forever?
Thank you. We can ask them in the next 14 days. Member Kama?
Chair, I've been saying the same thing in this meeting. I just realized now. and even now the advocate did not answer the question, because Chair, in terms of this act that I'm talking about, which is Act number 13 of 2021, Criminal Law, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act. In this act, Chair, Section 40 broadens the definition of what is a vulnerable group, which includes your people that, your young women that are under the age of 25 years. And then it puts at a point that like whether they're receiving training, and it differentiates in the structures that they stay in and other categories. Now, the question I was asking is whether, because ultimately one wants to sleep at night when we've realized that this matter is criminally investigated, because there's a possibility of a criminal conduct. Now, what I'm asking, Chair, the legal department or advice that whether the Premier was alerted to in terms of this act, whether it does not apply in this case, because if it applies, the Premier, according to the Act, Chair, would have, according to Section 54, failed in terms of his obligation to report to the police, because that Act in that section gives an obligation to any person who has information, suspicion about an act of sexual offense. So if that's the case, the Premier would have committed that. So that's the question that I was asking, which I hope that we can put it in writing to the Premier's legal team. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Member Kama. Member Malikaya, I see you.
Thanks, Chair. Lucky enough, the advocate Williams said she is going to provide you with the numbers and the contents of what has been said in terms of whether they warrant us to consider them as intimidation. But in her own conviction, she's the one who indicated that she was intimidated. So we cannot let that slip. If we as a committee can receive such and then refer to an appropriate body to take the matter forward, because if there were people who were trying to defeat the ends of justice within this process to ensure that the investigation doesn't continue, then relevant steps have got to be taken. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you so much. I will be engaging in that regard. But before we wrap up, Chairperson, Premier and Constitutional Matters, thank you so much, Member Botha, that the committee on the Premier and Member Doug was here that have agreed to join us today. Is there any concluding remarks from your side?
Chair, are you allowing me for a recommendation?
Yes, by all means.
Yes, and I think I'm latching on to what Member August has said, and I think Member Bartman as well. And I want to extend it by saying that we should do a meeting in this fashion once more and have the Department of Social Development present to us the lessons that has been learned through this matter, and how different and how they have adjusted how we treat matters like these going forward, so that the misuse of power because you are at management level or leadership level does not happen again. Thanks.
Thank you so much. On that note, I've seen, I was being deliberate. But I see Member Dagmo is still here. You may go, sir.
No, we appreciate your sense of humor, Chair. Just to say, firstly, as this is all recommendations, to request the Premier to make copies of the full report, which includes the 81 pages plus the annexures, with the names of the complainants removed, available to the committee. I also want to remind this committee that we are entitled to convene meetings in camera. But so we're pushing for, the resolution is that the committee requests the Premier to provide a copy of the full report plus all annexures as referred to the photographs and etc. Secondly, to resolve that the Premier convenes an urgent meeting with the Provincial Police Commissioner to hand over the full report and relevant annexures. Thirdly, and this might align with Member Botha, that social development be requested to also provide evidence of during the tenure while former MEC Fritz was the MEC for Social Development, and in particular to invite Mr. Robert MacDonald, who was the HOD at the time. Number three, that the letter from the Premier containing the terms of the formal terms of reference to Advocate Williams be provided. Fourthly, that we receive a copy of the current policy on GBV in the province and how to assist, and the current policy in regard to assistance to complainants. That the committee fifthly requests that the departmental investigation by Community Safety, once concluded, is provided to this committee and discussed. I think Honourable Clayco in regard to Advocate Williams, we request that all the information she referred to in terms of intimidation be provided to the committee by way of an affidavit from the advocate, including all relevant information of text plus telephone calls received, which she in this committee described as intimidation and the work of factions. So we want an affidavit from her so she can actually clarify that. And then the committee of the Premier to be convened to discuss how to strengthen current GBV policy in the provincial government. Second last, that this committee resolves to invite the following to provide information to the committee: JP Smith, Ricardo Mackenzie, and also Eddie Andrews, who were constituency members in the Mitchells Plain constituency, and that finally the committee is provided with the full information regard to the matter of Mr. Farrell Payne, including which investigations were conducted and what the reasons of the HOD were in regard to not placing Mr. Payne on precautionary suspension, given the fact that he is facing criminal charges in court. Thank you.
Member Bartman.
Chair, I need your guidance, because earlier we indicated, okay, can we have 14 days for the legal people of WCBP to come back to us? But now if we're asking for the report, technically it's contradiction. Can we first wait for the legal opinion and then make a decision once we get the legal opinion? Because otherwise now it's two contradicting, resolutions essentially. So that's just my question in terms of just some guidance. And then my other question is, in terms of the terms of reference, I'm fine with terms of reference, but we must just find out what does the terms of reference contain personal information. So if it doesn't contain personal information, if it's written similarly to the way I saw the summary and conclusions written, then I'm happy with that. And then I just wanted to some clarification maybe from the member. I'm not sure why Member Mackenzie must be called. I know Member Mackenzie is on personal leave officially, which was ATC'd and unanimously adopted by the House previously. So I'm not sure what the resolve to invite those people are, especially if it's been indicated that they've not had anything to do with this particular matter, for example. So I just need a bit of clarity on that. And actually, I think that the HOD of transport, I think that the Transport Committee will likely have to deal with that matter because it's their department. And perhaps they can then also ask that forensics is there maybe, or whoever is supposed to be there from legal, because I think the forensic maybe lies in the Premier's department. But I just need a little bit of guidance on that regard, Chair. Thanks.
Yes, you may.
Through you and just to make a suggestion to the members of the committee as for us to consider. I think there have been a number of suggestions made for resolutions. There have also been the issue of legal advice. So can I propose that you and the committee coordinator compile a list of all the recommendations that were made, and that the two committees convene again where we can then actually go through, because now there was some overlap with what various members said. So if there's an opportunity to, because we're not going to have time to do that now, so that can be circulated first of all in writing, then we can make comments, and then we have another meeting where we can then finalize the resolutions. I think there was also a suggestion by Member Murray that one of the members, I think Mr. August possibly, about the committee meeting again and deciding what else to do. But if those comprehensive draft resolutions could be circulated, we ask you as the chair, and obviously Member Botha as the chair for Premier, to then arrange a special meeting so that we go through the resolutions and consider the legal issues that Member Bartman has raised.
Just before I reply to Member Dugmore, Member Botha, your hand was raised earlier.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just want to say that I want to support the previous recommendation made by Member Hartman, that we wait for this legal opinion from WCPP before we embark on the recommendation of Member Dugmore. Thanks.
I will listen to Member Christians and then provide answers after.
There's certain things that don't have to wait. Like the legal opinion, we don't have to wait for that. If we can also include the terms of reference, then that's done. You see, the document that we want, and because I'm also worried about their liability on the WCPP. So if we can get the legal opinion on that don't have to wait. There's certain things that we differ, that I don't differ, but that is maybe a different opinion on. That we can discuss again, and that it can be circulated. But there's things that we can be done immediately, and I want to emphasize.
Members,
that.
what I will do as chairperson for community safety and cultural affairs and sport, I will engage the procedural officer. I will do a draft, and I will submit that to members before we send it off. I wouldn't want us to take this opportunity now and call for a vote on resolutions. I would want us to reach consensus in that way. And I trust that everyone will be okay with that. So you will look at the email I will be sending in due course, but I will apply urgency to it.
I just want to say there's certain things. Look, you must circulate it. That's important.
Yeah.
But there's certain things that can go. The others that's not resolved, we can discuss again.
Yeah.
But I don't think that everything needs to wait till we have a meeting. That is what I'm asking.
Yes.
Thank you.
So as of 12:57, we have not resolved in terms of inviting anyone. We have also not resolved in terms of requesting this redacted report. I will be communicating with everyone via email, and we will take it from there. I trust that everyone is.
So, Chair, essentially, we're not resolving on anything now, but what we're resolving is that all the draft resolutions are going to be integrated and circulated, and then we are going to then, decide what we agree on and what we don't agree on, what the committee agrees on.
Yes.
And by when will the draft resolutions of this meeting be provided?
We will try as soon as possible. ComSafe is having a marathon by meeting tomorrow and meeting Friday, 3 days in a row, but we will try it with urgency. I just wouldn't want the committee to be used in any way where it becomes somewhere in the media that we resolved and then we did not resolve.
Yes.
Because I hate speaking to the media through, I hate speaking to you through the media. Member Dugmore, I want to speak face to face.
That opinion should also just include the fact that as a committee we can meet and we can meet in confidence, and that a report can be.
No, no.
So the legal opinion to making the full report available without names, that the full report comes here at a closed meeting, etc. All of those issues need.
Yeah, we will discuss all of that stuff. Member Bartman, you're happy? Everyone's happy? So I can adjourn. I just have sad news due to the urgency of the meeting and the WCPP's protocols. We could not do lunch or stuff. Member Bartman, thank you so much to everyone as a new member, Member Botha, and everyone else online. Thank you so much. This meeting is adjourned.